Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Welcome to this episode of the murder part. The topic we're looking at today isn't technically a murder, but the murder part still felt like a better connection to this topic than alien, lizard, humanoids, so we're going to go with the murder part. We're looking today at an incident that occurred on the set of a movie titled Rust. It was a low-budget Western, and an actor named Alec Baldwin fired a weapon on the set and killed a director of photography, cinematographer. So that's what we'll be talking about in today's video. Again, we realize that no murder occurred in this incident. So let's start with the introductions. Jeff?
My name is Jeff Pincin, and I'm a licensed professional counselor in states of Delaware and Pennsylvania, and I specialize in the treatment of OCD and other obsessive-compulsive disorders. And we got so many good questions that we're probably going to make another video of maybe just questions. So we might not answer any in this video, but we might just make another video. If I didn't become a counselor, what I really wanted to do was I wanted to pick and choose which accent I use depending on who I'm around and which culture I want to represent at the moment. Turns out nobody wants to pay you for that. No one really cares which accent you use. Well, they do, but they don't want to pay you for it. That's for sure. So I had to become a counselor. Second best, right?
Another tough break.
That's tough.
Yeah, really tough. It was like I just had to settle for that. Yeah. So many big things coming. I was so ready for the big things in my life, but counseling.
Right, and they kind of frown on you using accents in counseling sessions.
Yeah, especially ones that aren't genuine.
Right.
Crazy.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Thanks for the support, guys.
Yeah.
Mike, we'll move to you.
Also, Mike Smith, also licensed professional counselor, mental health in the state of Delaware, focusing on narrative therapy and geek therapy, and I am a self-styled expert in all things geek. And if I had not become a counselor for a while there, I wanted to become actually a film director, writer-director. I wanted to write movies and direct them, but Delaware is really far from Hollywood, and it's really far from Vancouver, two great centers for making movies, and I didn't start down that path until I was after high school. And while I could write things, I didn't have enough money to buy a camera, which kind of set me back a little bit. Mm-hmm. Geography and money stopped that particular train from sailing, so to speak. I had to settle for being a counselor instead.
Man, rough.
Yeah, another tough break.
Sorry, Mike.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, I don't really think too many movies have been shot in Delaware. I know that Robin Williams came here for Dead Poets
Society.
Yeah. Yeah. And there were a few others. I knew a few people years ago who had been like extras or very low, like very small roles in movies, but not really many. Yeah,
there are a few that are filmed occasionally in Philadelphia, and that's not far. But again, it's not a major movie hub.
Not what it's known for. No. Corporate capital of the United States, though.
Yeah. That's for sure. Lots of banks.
I mean, there is one scene in the movie Fight Club that was filmed in Delaware. Mm-hmm. No, I was filmed in Delaware City in a parking lot. Because that movie is actually set in Delaware.
Right.
The book was written and specifically mentions it, but it doesn't say in the movie. But it is set in Delaware, and the idea of blowing up the buildings is actually blowing up the buildings of Wilmington, Delaware, because they're the corporate havens. They're supposed to be where all of the tax information and all the credit card information was held in the mid-'90s was in Wilmington.
Ironically, very little of that movie was actually shot in Delaware.
Yeah, very little of it.
Yeah.
Just one scene. One scene.
Well, we almost had it.
almost hit the big league. Yeah. So I think Hollywood was originally selected because of the long duration of natural light in the, 20s or 30s, whenever all that started.
Yeah, earlier than that. I think it was early 1900s.
Wow. Yeah. So I guess electricity hard to come by, natural light free out there.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, Delaware definitely would not have been a good selection.
Yeah. No, we don't have natural light for long periods of time.
Very short movies.
Yeah.
And they turn off the lights at 5 o'clock.
All the power just shuts down. You can hear. Whoa.
Oh, they roll up the sidewalks too.
All right. So I know this case is very well known, but let's go through a quick summary of kind of what happened. This has been all over the internet and everywhere. Major story. But let's hear about the incident. I think it was at Bonanza Creek Ranch.
Yeah, Bonanza Creek Ranch, October 21st of this year, 2021. Major players in this, Alec Baldwin, Halyna Hutchins was the cinematographer, director of photography for the film, director Joel Souza. Alec Baldwin was practicing for a scene, and it had been announced that the gun he was using was a cold gun, which my understanding is that means that it does not have live ammunition in it. So he was handed this gun and was practicing with it, and pointed it at the camera and at Halyna Hutchins, and pulled my understanding anyway, pulled the hammer back and pulled the trigger. There was live ammunition in it for some reason. Still unknown why that was there. So the bullet hit and went through Halyna Hutchins and hit Joel Souza, the director. Halyna Hutchins, of course, would pass away. Unfortunately, Joel Souza was injured but did not pass away. Other major players in this, the armorer for the movie, Hannah Gutierrez Reed, and the assistant director, Dave Halls. Dave Halls was the one that announced it was a cold gun. Hannah Gutierrez Reed was the one in charge of weapons and things for the movie. So there's still a lot of question about what exactly happened, why there was a live round in the gun, who was responsible to know that and to check it. So not much that we know in terms of what do we do moving forward, or certainly no charges have been made on anybody. But an unfortunate scene nonetheless. If protocols maybe had been followed like they were supposed to be, then maybe there wouldn't be anybody dead right now. But there is. So hopefully this leads to more conversations in that industry of, how do we do better next time? So short summary for that.
Very good.
It is difficult to say, how do we do better next time in a area that is actually typically incredibly safe.
Mm-hmm. Very few instances of this.
Since 1915, there have been, this is now the fourth on-set death from firearms. The first was 1915 Cecil B. DeMille movie, where an extra was shot by a rifle that was supposed to be loaded with blanks. And then the next was in 1984, and when I can never remember his name. It's weird. Hold on a second. Right, it's John Eric Hexum.
Oh, right.
1984. He was on the set of a TV show he was doing called Cover Up, and he took a gun that was loaded with blanks. It was taking an incredibly long time to film the scene, and he was getting really, he was impatient. So he's like, oh, somebody kill me now. He put the gun to his head, pulled the trigger, and the blank itself went off and did enough damage that just the expanding gases coming out of the barrel did enough damage to the skull that it dislodged pieces and sent those pieces into his brain. Mm-hmm. And he died from that injury. After that was 1993.
The Crow.
1993 with The Crow and Brandon Lee. And then 2021.
Alec Baldwin. Yeah.
Alec Baldwin. So in over 100 years, there have been 4 on-set deaths due to guns. There have been maybe 150 or so injuries that didn't become deaths in that same time period. But that, in comparison to some other fields of work, even in counseling, that's an incredibly small number of injuries, accidents, and an incredibly small number of deaths. In general, it's very, very safe to have guns on sets.
Yeah, there's been a big movement. We can talk about this, but there's been a big movement now. I think it was The Rock, Dwayne. Well, I don't know if he's allowed to call himself that anymore, but Dwayne Johnson.
I think everybody else does. Like whether he's allowed to call himself that or not, everyone else still calls him.
I think it's like
The
trademarked
Rock.
from like the WWF or
Probably.
some whatever. I don't know much about that world, but he was some type of wrestler, like a not a real wrestler, like a fake, like the theatrical wrestlers, pro wrestler, or whatever.
Yeah,
they're
pro
called.
wrestler. Yeah.
And that was his name. And I guess my understanding is there was some hard feelings, like you just can't take your stage name and run off. I don't know how that works, but so it's Dwayne Johnson. And he has some type of, I guess, a production company. He's a big star. And he's saying no guns. And I think it's just a knee-jerk response. It's like seeing a plane crash and saying, that's it. Air travel's done. No more planes. Rubber planes only. You know, it doesn't really make sense. You have to look at how frequently something happens. I mean, you have way more intentional or unintentional and negligent discharges from police officers trying to clean their guns than you do in the movies.
Which also goes to speak to one of the statements made by Alec Baldwin just this week, a couple of days ago, I think it was, from filming, was he said, we should have police officers in every set handling the guns. Mm-hmm. I'm like, police officers have way more accidental discharges than most armorers.
Right. Yeah, they're not weapons specialists. Right. That's the thing. Like, police are expected to do everything.
Yeah.
And they don't actually spend a lot of time handling their weapons on duty. Like, if they do, they get in trouble. You know, you can't just go pointing guns at people. Mm-hmm. So like, I wouldn't trust the police to drive. Like, wow, they're awful drivers. Or to handle a gun. Although, I mean, certain police, yes, like the ones that have a lot of training, like the instructors. But a regular police officer, no way.
Speaking of driving, like sometimes police officers do, and this is from a police officer told me this. Sometimes when a police officer just is in a hurry to go somewhere, when they get to a light, if it turns red, they'll just hit their siren, cruise through, and then turn it off just to keep going. Because technically, if they have their siren on, they're allowed to do that so they can reach the scene. But sometimes they do it when they're just in a hurry to get to Wawa or something. Yeah. And it's just like, I don't feel like waiting in line. And go through.
We've all seen it.
Yeah. I think it is. I think what happened is, for the longest time, they could pretty much do whatever they wanted. And with video technology, now that we see what they're doing, it's like, I can't believe they're doing this. And there's like a lot of blowback. Yeah. And their line of work, which used to be kind of like a lot of adventure and excitement, tackling people, fighting with people, now they really can't do that. So it's a boring desk job, or, you know, in the seat of a car job, and departments are having trouble recruiting. I saw something the other day where some police chief was lamenting that no one wants to be a cop. Well, yeah, but they wanted to be for the wrong reasons. So is that really a bad thing? Maybe we need to restructure that job.
We also have police organizations all over the country, so, you know, saying like, no vaccine mandates for us. I'm like, you have one of the jobs where your job is to interact with the public. Your likelihood, police have been hit so hard by COVID. Like, the number of cases amongst police is like 4 times or 5 times that of the, you know, average individual. Why wouldn't you want to be vaccinated against that to prevent that from happening? But they're going like, don't tell us that we have to.
Yeah.
But it should be part of your job. You're also mandated to get, you know, a certain number of medical training in first aid so that you can render certain assistance.
Aren't they also mandated for other vaccines like tuberculosis? Like, yeah. What's the difference if they add one more? Yeah.
No, you can't mandate we have to have a TB test. Yeah, we can. We can,
and yeah, we have.
But the other thing is the option exists for most people, especially in police forces, is it's either you get vaccinated and have your vaccine card, or you submit to weekly testing for COVID. But they never bring that up. They just go, oh, you can't tell us we have to get these vaccines. Well, yeah, they can.
Yeah. Well, you know, there's a lot of people that across all occupations that have been affected by kind of the anti-vaccination misinformation. And a lot of it, I think, is they already believe that. Mm-hmm. And the misinformation, it's bad, but I think they already thought, like, they didn't like vaccines.
Supports what they already believed anyway.
Yeah. Maybe there's so much information because there were so many people who now have to support their ideology.
The one that I always hear everybody that is anti-vax for the COVID vaccine. And for a while there, I did want to think that there was a difference between the pre-COVID anti-vaxxers who were just like, don't get your kids vaccinated, and like the COVID anti-vaxxers. Like, I thought they were like two different. Turns out they're not. They're the same. Yeah. Just a bigger thing. But the thing I keep hearing from the COVID anti-vaxxers is, well, it came out really fast. Like, they didn't have time to do the research. Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
They've been working on a COVID vaccine, not specifically for COVID-19, but it's, you know, SARS-CoV-2 has been around for a long time. They've been working on a COVID vaccine for the past decade. All they had to do was tailor it to COVID-19 and then do the human studies with it.
Yeah. Well, also it was a massive effort.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? It wasn't cheap.
No, that's the thing. So in some of the viral experiments to get vaccines, it'll take years to get the 20,000 or 40,000 people that they need in order to have a accurate sample size. With COVID-19, they got that in 2 weeks. There was a ample enough sample that they were able to get the information they needed in faster than having to get 2 or 3 people at a time all over the world. Mm-hmm. They just were able to go hey, anybody want to be part of this? Yes.
I'm surprised that even with the trials for the kids, they got more than they needed, which I'm glad, I'm thankful. But people with themselves, are like, all right, whatever. But with their kids, much more reserved, much more, I don't know about this. So I was really glad that they got ample enough sample size, especially for kids as well.
Yeah. So either way, now moving back to this movie set incident. So Alec Baldwin, he's an interesting guy, right? He was in Hunt for Red October, a few other movies, not a strong dramatic actor, but a good kind of lighthearted, semi-comedic actor. We see it in 30 Rock.
That was his wonderful straight man.
Yeah.
For any kind of really wacky comedic opposite, just wonderful. He has a great deadpan expression.
He combined well with all the other actors in that show as well.
Yeah, I think it was Jack Donaghy was his character. Yeah, It was hysterical. I liked him in Hunt for October and a few other things. Was it Malice or Absence of Malice? The movie I think it was Nicole Kidman where he was a surgeon. I think that was him. I don't know. I looked that up, but he had a few kind of famous lines. I thought that was him. But I think in
he is my favorite of the Baldwin brothers.
Right. Well, I mean that's not a massive competition, but but yeah, I think in 30 Rock he really hit his stride, and he also did okay as Donald Trump on Saturday Night Live. But the new guy, the new guy, I liked.
Incredible.
I liked Alec Baldwin. I thought he did a good job as Trump, although I felt like SNL overplayed that a little.
Yeah.
But the new guy they just put on the last one was he doesn't look anything like him, which Baldwin did. But in terms of
sound,
he was so good, and they were just showing off. He was so talented. Mm-hmm. They went to a whole second list, and just look, I'm so
just
good.
Just because they could, right?
I'm just going to show off. I mean, SNL has a hit or miss, right? But that was a hysterical.
I've been watching that guy for a while because he's been doing that impersonation for years, and he has always been spot on. And so I'm so glad they were able to get him onto SNL because they're really hitting a stride this season, especially just some of the other cast members, Cecily Strong and her whole thing too. And so they're really hitting something this season that a lot of people feel they've missed for a while.
Yeah, well, they've had. I feel like after the original cast was gone, it's been kind of you never know each year. It's sometimes they're on, sometimes they're off, and they had a real rough time in the late '70s. But then we saw Eddie Murphy in 1980 totally saved them. They would have been canceled.
Oh yeah,
I'm convinced of it. Mm-hmm. They started writing for 19-year-old Eddie Murphy just because really the rest of the cast was that bad, and he was very talented.
And the new director,
he pulled the show up. Yeah, he saved
and he was really kind of the beginning of a new generation of SNL, which then they go through their ups and downs. And man,
I thought it's been really good the past. I started watching it 6 years ago. I always thought it's been really good. I've always been an SNL fan ever since I started watching it. I can understand the ups and downs, but I think they've had some really great actors on there, some really great cast members, and people that nobody would have known otherwise, really. Other than on the stand-up circuit. But I don't know. I've been a fan for a while, and I'm okay with even if it's not great. I'm still cool with it because I think the format they have there is something you can't really get a lot of other places. Just the rawness of it. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think it started in, I want to say something like 75. And it has its own nostalgia. That's now, so it has a power just beyond, an effect just beyond it's a show where people make jokes. So if you look at any one show, it's but you look at everything, the work, right. The legacy, it's really quite incredible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, Alec Baldwin, though, as an actor, I think there's like two movies that of his that I really, really like. Beetlejuice.
Mm-hmm. That was my number one as well.
That's the number one. That's the number one. That's his absolute best role. And he did a wonderful job in that. Mainly because he was that straight man. Like he was trying to figure things out and just, oh my goodness, what the hell? What's going on? I have no idea. The other one that I really like, it's a terrible, terrible movie. It was The Shadow.
I think I did see that. Yeah.
It's a terrible movie, but I love it so much because it's so terrible. It was one of those, like, it was made to be super stylistic and out there because it came out like it was based on a really old radio show, The Shadow, which also was a comic book for a while. Yeah. But the movie itself, the stylistic era came inspired by Dick Tracy, which was huge. Mm-hmm. So they were trying to capitalize on that, and it was at the same time that they did The Phantom,
right?
Which was really Phantom's one of my favorite characters in comics, just because it's such an interesting backstory. But that movie wasn't bad. It wasn't good.
Wasn't good.
But it was another one of those like super stylized movies that I really kind of enjoy. But The Shadow I thought was great. Like huge plot holes, some terrible acting, but it's still.
Was the guy from?
He's wonderful.
Was the guy from Titanic the guy in The Phantom? What's the guy's name? The lover of Rose.
Leonardo DiCaprio.
No,
it wasn't.
The other. Yeah, I don't know his name.
He's Billy Zane.
Billy Zane. Yeah, it was Billy Zane. Yeah,
yep.
Yeah. Billy Zane played Kit Carson in The Phantom.
I just want to make sure I had the right Phantom, and no, that wasn't good.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. Absolutely terrible, but I still love it.
I had forgotten that Alec Baldwin was in this, so it's certainly not an Alec Baldwin movie. But you guys see Black Klansman?
Mm-hmm. I actually didn't get a chance to see that.
It is
I really
wanted
to see that. I did want to see that.
Like I thought it was really good. So. Not an Alec Baldwin movie necessarily, but he was in it, and I think it's a great movie. Like I think what they did there, telling the story of that, of what happened, is really great. So
it'll keep your attention the entire time.
That's for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
So the movie I was talking about was Malice, and so not Absence of Malice, but Malice. And I think it was Nicole Kidman was in there. I don't know. It was somebody else. But Alec Baldwin, and he had the famous line was the "I am God." It was the "I am God" speech. He was a neurosurgeon. And
okay.
I don't want to give away too much in the movie. Okay, well, it's 1993. That was back, but
it was Nicole Kidman.
Well, okay, yeah. That was to me that was a kind of a movie that represented the style of the early 90s pretty well. It's just the way it flowed and some of the plot devices. But yeah, so he's had a pretty good career.
Bill Pullman was in that movie too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he did a good job in that one. I always liked Bill Pullman. He was in Independence Day.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anne Bancroft.
As the president, I think. Right?
Yeah.
Who also flew a plane.
In Independence Day, he was the president. He'd been a pilot before he was president, so he knew how to fly a plane.
So anyway, I was a little surprised that somebody as well known as Alec Baldwin was in a very low budget. Originally reported $6.5 million. It was actually about $7.5 million for the movie, which is, as I talked about in one of my videos, The Crown, which of course is a great show. I mean, I would argue one of the best series ever. $13 million per episode, I believe it is. Mm-hmm. So one hour or so episode of The Crown, almost twice as good as whatever this Western was going to be if they finished.
Almost twice as much money.
Right. Which usually, writing being equal. Yeah. Now, I don't know, maybe the story of Harlan Rust was really incredible. Doesn't sound like it. It sounds cookie cutter.
It does sound like a spaghetti Western. Like it sounds really like just you throw some money at this and just have fun. I think it was like a passion project thing. Like every big actor does that. They have their passion projects or the projects that they do because a friend says they owe them. To quote a Kevin Smith movie, because it's really really funny. But they do like if Alec Baldwin really liked this and he could only get $7 million built up to fund it, and he was still willing to do it, then it's because of passion. He wanted to do this because he liked the story.
Yeah. In the, I forget how many there were, but they released a document that had all the pay for everybody. Mm-hmm. And that was Baldwin's company, so it's kind of weird. Obviously, he's kind of paying himself, whatever. He's making $250,000, I think, altogether with bonuses and everything. But there was also many, many other producers. So many that they would be tripping over each other. I didn't quite get that. Like there was way more than I've seen on other movies. So I don't know if they were also investors or how that works. But one of the key players, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, was making around $7,000 or $8,000, $7,300 or something like that. And I don't know how long you have to work on it, but like Joel Souza was making $220, something like that. Yeah. A major difference.
Yeah.
But since, so for $7,300 doesn't sound like a lot, but that's $7,300 for like 6 weeks worth.
Well, imagine though, like she was an armor.
Yeah.
So imagine for somebody like David Halls and Halyna Hutchins, I think she made 43, something. I'm just guessing on these, some of that. And then for Joel Souza, I imagine they have some kind of pre-production work,
Yeah, sure.
right? And then the production and maybe even post-production, like, oh, this is how I envision the shot, take that cut, take that take and not that take. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Whereas the armor, if somebody's not handling a gun.
Only on set.
Then, yeah.
They're pretty much only on set. Joel Souza, the director, he's got stuff from the beginning, like casting stuff has to be done before they even shoot anything. They have to decide on what kind, storyboards and what kind of cameras they want to work with, which would be working with Halyna Hutchins on figuring that kind of things out. And then, where are we going to be doing the filming and all of this stuff, like finding the sets, figuring out what sets to build if they don't have them, all those kinds of things. A lot of stuff has to be done for the director has to be involved in. The armorer is just on set. And after the movie wraps filming, Joel Souza has a lot more work to do with doing the editing, working with editors, trying to figure out what, which shots he wants to use, how he wants to do things, working with the music, putting the right music cues in and trying to get it all together. Halyna Hutchins still be involved because of the shots, and if they need to do reshoots, she'll be involved. She would have been involved at that point. But again, the armorer wouldn't be at that point. The armorer would be moving on to another project. So $7,300 doesn't sound like a lot, but it's not a whole year's pay. Right. It's that 6 weeks worth of work when she's on set.
Yeah, I guess more importantly is how often could she get work like that? Yeah. Can you really make a living if you only get a job like that like twice a year?
If you only get a job like that twice a year, yeah. But the fact that there are so many movies that use firearms, there's always work for an armorer. Always.
I don't know if she's going to get too much work.
I don't
in
think
this
she
specific
will.
Case, but yeah,
I don't think she will after this point. But most armorers in the business can get quite a bit of work.
My understanding is she has 2 different attorneys, right? So 2 defense attorneys, or whatever. I don't know if they call themselves defense attorneys when there's no charges, but they're just attorneys. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure they probably are criminal attorneys, and they have been very talky.
Yeah.
Which I think before an indictment, again, she might not be indicted at all. You never know. I think she will be, but it's my opinion. Before an indictment, to be talking up a storm, I don't get the strategy. And then they came up with this conspiracy theory. Right. Now, not all conspiracy theories are false. Mm-hmm. This one was a little far out, where somebody snuck live cartridges into a box of ammunition. But this is why I don't think they should talk. That sort of implies that she didn't check that box. Right?
To be fair to that point, anyone who worked on the set and knew and worked with those boxes and saw the dummy rounds would see how those were marked. Different productions mark their dummy rounds differently. A dummy round is a round that has no powder in it, no primer in it, but the lead tip, the actual bullet, is seated in the cartridge. They look really good on camera as long as you're not looking at the primer end. They look really. There's a hole right. Because there's no primer in it. So, like if you have it sitting on the table, you have 6 of them lined up. They look like live rounds. They're fine. But you turn it over, you see a hole. Some productions even will paint the bottom of them a different color, so it's obvious when you're looking in the box that all of these are dummy rounds. I don't know how she would have missed seeing a primer in a box of dummy rounds, but if those rounds had were supposed to be seen from the bottom, so they had lead caps in them to mimic primers, that could be why.
Yeah.
But I would think they wouldn't use those or keep them, or wouldn't be using those in that particular type of shot.
Yeah, let's go through some of the backstory, because I think, what we want to do, of course, is to see things as Hannah Gutierrez Reed saw them right as this came up, and Dave Halls, who yelled cold gun, and of course Alec Baldwin, who actually technically fired the fatal shot. Yeah. No way to word that nicely.
Right.
That doesn't mean he's guilty of a crime, but he did fire the weapon. He did pull the trigger.
And there were all sorts of safety issues going on with that, even with that practice. He was told to practice that shot by the director, by Joel Souza. But the problem was they didn't clear the shot. That's one of the rules that they would follow on set. And the fact that Hannah Gutierrez didn't push them to follow that rule, again, puts a little bit of onus on her.
I think she's in a tough spot. I mean, it makes sense to me proportionally that she's got two defense attorneys, and we haven't heard from anyone else. Although I just saw a lawsuit got filed, I think it was today, against Baldwin by someone. This could be legitimate. It just seems fast to put a lawsuit together, but maybe it's a very quick attorney, from someone who attended to Halyna and is now saying essentially they're traumatized. Could be. It just very quick. Like it just happened. But
there was one filed by one of the grips on the set as well, if I'm correct. Maybe that's the same person.
Could be the same. Yeah.
Okay.
It was somebody who immediately ran over to Halyna and saw her bleeding.
Okay. Yeah, probably the same person.
Yeah.
I think Alec has been fairly talkative as well. Like, just him and his wife, Hilaria. I think they've just been talking too much.
Yeah.
And I think that's really getting him into some trouble as well, because, he did accidentally shoot someone, and that doesn't, the way that he feels after that, of course, that's difficult, because he didn't intend for anything to happen, but it did. He accidentally killed someone. So he's going to have to, live with however he's feeling, the consequences of that, however he's feeling. So when he's going around talking about it, of course, that makes people speculate more, and he should probably just follow the advice of whomever, public relations people, lawyers, whatever, and just not say anything, because now people we're going to speculate, and we're going to analyze what he said, and stuff like that. So I think there's just too much talking going on from these people. They should I don't know, they should learn the effect of what they're doing there.
Yeah, I think that considering that actors are weird, right? Because a lot of people like them, but there's always a lot of people that don't. And Alec was in that category, right? He had some things in the past. I remember I think he was on 60 Minutes where, was that him? He yelled at his daughter. Is that Alec Baldwin? He yelled at his daughter and left a nasty voicemail. I don't know. I think that was him. And just and many actors do this, right? Everything they do. Like, was it one of the Marvel heroes got in trouble recently? Was it Chris Evans? Is that his name? Or is he Marvel?
Yeah.
Chris Evans, who made some insensitive comments. Like they're all
Chris Pratt, I think.
Chris Pratt.
Oh yeah. Right.
They all do that. So some people are still going to like him, but other people are going to take everything he says and dissect it. Mm-hmm. And I think he leaves himself really open to that, especially with unplanned remarks.
Yeah, back in 2007, Alec Baldwin left a threatening message for his daughter.
Yeah, I remember. I'm a big fan of 60 Minutes because it's always so polished, even though they have made some pretty big mistakes with it.
Glaring errors.
Laura Logan there with the whole uncorroborated thing, and she got in trouble for that. But I don't think she's on there anymore. I always liked it. And I remember it was Alec Baldwin. I'm good to know that my memory's still that good. But I remember him kind of, whoever the correspondent was, I want to say it was Morley Safer, but I don't remember. But I remember him kind of I think he felt like Morley was kind of judging him. And you could see for a moment he kind of broke out of character and got really nasty with Morley. And, Morley was right. Like what he said was terrible. There's no getting around it. But he kind of like tried to flip things around, like Morley was being too sanctimonious or something. I remember thinking it's a glimpse into this guy, and he's not a nice guy. But I would say maybe they're all not, right, at their worst moment. But those type of moments, I think people put those away, and now it comes back to get him, no matter what he says.
Sure.
So, I don't know why they're not being quiet. Whatever happens criminally, this is going to be millions and millions of dollars of payout, more than the $7 million. Now, I don't know if the guy who says he's traumatized from the shooting out, I don't see that being a huge settlement because he didn't get actually struck with a bullet, but who knows?
Right.
But
and it's been less than a month
since
that happened. So if they're claiming PTSD, like who's gonna diagnose you with PTSD? Given
it's acute stress disorder.
It'd be acute stress disorder if it's within the first month. So it'd be okay. He's got acute stress. Can't be PTSD until after. So if they're filing an injunction or filing a lawsuit in the first month and claiming post-traumatic stress disorder, where'd you get that diagnosis?
Yeah, maybe he's just. I don't know anything about him, but maybe it's just an attempt to settle, like hoping. I don't know.
But I did just see another article that came out today. One of her lawyers, Jason Bowles, said not only that it was sabotage, but that Hannah Gutierrez Reed is being framed. That the scene was not only sabotage, but the scene was altered by someone after the fact, before the police got there.
Oh, gee.
to
point in her direction.
I feel like they're reaching a bit, right?
I think that is a big reach.
So of all the people, now look, everybody's important, of course, but of all the people that you could frame on a movie set, why would you pick the armorer who's making $7,000? What, did she offend you? Like you would pick Alec Baldwin or the director or one of the other producers?
The only place I can see like the sabotage being realistic isn't like putting real bullets in a clearly dummy round box, because it's going to be really obvious just looking at it. It's going to be like she puts the rounds in, the assistant director Halls checks it, says it's cold, and then hands it to an assistant who walks it over to Alec Baldwin, and while he's walking over, he dumps one and puts a live round in and cycles over and hands it over. Then that guy is responsible because they followed the proper protocols to a point. Like the gun should have been handed directly to Baldwin, not handed to somebody else. But I don't know if that happened either. Like that's the only situation I can think of where it would make sense. Mm-hmm. Any other situation is Hannah loads a live round into that gun, and then the assistant director spins the cylinder and doesn't catch the live round. They're now both responsible,
right? Yeah,
and then he hands it with a live round to Alec Baldwin,
who also bears responsibility because he pointed a weapon at a human being and pulled the trigger, which you never do, no matter what the status of the gun.
Yeah. Right.
But like I said in one of the videos I did, I don't see a jury finding an actor like Alec Baldwin guilty. I figure, this is like an A-list actor. He's going to get up there and talk about how he's so sad. He's going to turn on the tears. Like he's a good actor, not very strong dramatically, but enough to fool a jury. And
I don't even think that he necessarily has to act. I think he genuinely does feel bad.
Well, he's expressive, right? Like I think he's going to. I mean, usually in self-defense cases, defendants do testify. This isn't self-defense. This is maybe involuntary manslaughter is what we're looking at.
Possibly.
Right. If they're ever indicted. But I could still see a lawyer being like, let's put him on the stand. Mm-hmm. We got somebody who's pretty solid with they're articulate and put together. And there's two other people to blame. So there's a little blame shifting. And then he walks. Mm-hmm. I see him walking if he's even charged. Yeah.
I just don't see a prosecutor charging him for it because, yes, his finger pulled the trigger, but as an actor being handed a prop gun and being told it's just a prop and not live.
I could see him given immunity for his enthusiastic testimony against the other two.
If they told me it was cold. Cold is the term that we, and that's a movie term completely. cold versus hot, if it has a round that has any kind of powder or explosive in it, like even if it's just a primer, it's considered to be hot. If it has dummy loads in it and should be safe, it's cold.
Yeah, one could argue that they should always be considered live, so
Absolutely.
they shouldn't even say hot or cold. They should say gun, dangerous.
Assume that it's
And that's the thing. I think some armorers do. That's the thing in the movie industry. There is no standard for armorers. I looked into this. The props master guild has certain responsibilities for prop masters. They often will include armorers, but armorers don't have their own subset of that guild, and they don't have their own union either. In order to be an armorer on any film based out of California, which has some of the strictest gun laws in the country, one has to have an entertainer's firearms permit. An entertainment firearm permit. And what's required to get that is you have to be 21 years old. You have to be able to pass an immediate criminal background check and a fingerprint background check. And pay $104. That's it.
there you go.
That's it.
So somebody starting out,
Yeah, and you can get that license. And if you have that license, if you have that permit, you can go to any studio and say, I can be your armorer. You're licensed.
so somebody starting out like Hannah Gutierrez-Reed could very easily do that, especially given her father and how he was well-known armor.
Thel Reed is one of the most well-known armorers in Hollywood.
So I'm sure people are going to be like, oh, she's young, but
She has his
learned
pedigree.
from-
She has his pedigree. She learned from Thel, and Thel's the best. And I wish that was true, but it doesn't seem to be, because this wasn't the first film that she had incidents on.
No, and there's been other reports of her behavior, even on this set, right, that seems to indicate a casual attitude toward, like a playful attitude, like we're just having fun. So let's set this up. So this is a $7.5 million movie in the middle, or in Santa Fe County, near Santa Fe, New Mexico. And apparently a famous kind of site for these type of things.
Bonanza Creek Ranch was used for lots of different westerns over the years.
Yeah, well known. It's got a small wooden church, which was the focus of this. But when they back up the shot, you also saw a bunch of other buildings that also look very Old West-like. So we see that the crew wasn't happy. I guess they had to drive from Albuquerque about an hour or so.
Well, because of the low budget. Like they had initially, I think, been housed at a local motel. Was like 5-minute drive from the ranch, and then they were told they couldn't do that anymore because they just didn't have the budget to cover the hotel or the motel for all the crew. So they were going to have to drive from their homes in Albuquerque, which is apparently a 2-hour drive.
Yeah, and these were union. Right, so these were union, like I think union cameramen, camera people were the focus of this particular. They became upset. 6 of them.
I don't know how. Well, I think when they said 2 hours, it's 2 hours round trip.
I think it's an hour.
An hour in the morning, an hour in the evening, because the average speed limit on the roads out there is 75 miles an hour, and it's less than 50 miles.
You can move pretty good in New Mexico.
Yeah, you can haul ass, and if you got a good car, just haul ass and get out there. But I think it's like we got to drive 2 hours a day.
especially for someone who's union. Obviously they have certain, criteria or, things that they're like not willing to do, the union can stick up for them, things like that. I imagine maybe that's part of the mindset of here's an expectation and this is what we want to follow kind of thing.
I just say boo-hoo. I had to drive 2 hours a day for my internship. Thank you very much.
That's right. That was a long...
Two hours each way. So it was a total of 4 hours of driving because Eagleville's an hour and a half on a good day. And if you put any traffic in the way, it's 2 hours each way.
Especially when you get up to those Pennsylvania back roads.
Yeah.
We need to create a union then for
2 hours each way
interns.
for my unpaid internship. These guys were really getting paid and could do 75 miles an hour on roads that were probably virtually
straight and flat.
And virtually no traffic on. Like they just, I wish I'd had that going up to Eagleville.
Well, either way, I mean, I think the story was that they replaced them with non-union people because obviously they're willing to, maybe work for less or, worse conditions because they're not part of that union that's going to represent them and have certain standards. So that was kind of set up for failure in my mind.
Mm-hmm. And there were complaints by some of the other crew members that there were unsafe practices going on, not just with the firearms, but with other things as well.
Well, this happened on October 21, 2021. And on October 16, there were at least 2 unintentional discharges. Mm-hmm. And I thought I saw another report where there was another one before that. But
Hannah Gutierrez Reed had one accidental discharge on a previous movie that she worked on.
Okay.
So like she had an unintentional discharge on that set, and then had 2 on this particular one before this incident ever happened.
Yeah, and just 5 days. So on October 21, that's when the union camera operators left and the non-union came in. So at least I think 6 new people, although they're not really handling guns. So it shouldn't have been a big deal, but I think it shows kind of like how people were upset.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a happy time. At 12:30 p.m., everybody took a break for lunch and a van came over and took them to a catering tent, which makes you wonder, why isn't the tent closer?
Because the tent's probably closer to where the kitchen is, so that they can move the food very easily.
There you go.
But the church is on the other side of because they can't move the church.
No, that's true. That would be tricky. So,
I mean, to be fair, on some of those back lots, in order to get to the commissary, you've got to jump on a golf cart and drive for 20 minutes.
Yeah, like was it Warner Brothers?
Yeah.
And Paramount, I think both have like golf carts, and you'll see like behind the scenes different shows, and they're running around with those. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess they're eco-friendly. I guess
they're relatively cheap in comparison to running cars. Plus, a little bit safer, and they can get through smaller spaces.
Golf carts are surprisingly expensive. I had one some years ago. I got a deal on it, but new ones are like 6,000-7,000, I think. Yeah. I was surprised. I guess they're supposed to run for a long time.
Wish I had one.
The one I had was pretty fun. It was a 48-volt club car, and had nothing, like no roof, like no poles in a roof. It was just like a service body, and I replaced the some type of actuator. It was like $75. I bought it and put it in. You got to be careful because a lot of voltage.
Yeah,
it was 48 volts. It'll put a hurting on you, and it went about 20 miles per hour. It was a lot of fun, and it had, like all electric vehicles, a ton of torque.
Instant torque, I imagine.
Yeah, it wasn't enough to do like on pavement. I couldn't burn out or whatever, but on grass, you could floor it and turn the wheel, and it would just donut. It was a lot of fun.
I could do that in my car.
a little more horsepower. Right?
A little bit more oomph. So try it on your front yard.
Let's see what it does. So so some ammunition was left on. So firearms and ammunition were supposed to be locked inside of a truck. Mm-hmm. It was, I guess, the truck that Hannah was supposed to use. And then we see this other story that there was some of ammunition on a cart outside the vehicle.
Yeah, supposedly she was using the cart to transport ammunition and firearms from the truck to like wherever they were on the set, which is fine. If she's got her hands on it and the stuff is right there, no big deal. It's still safe. But apparently, like everything else was locked up, and she wasn't near it, and the boxes of ammo and weapons were still just sitting on the cart, which means they were unattended, and anything could happen at that point.
Yeah. So they returned from lunch, and the prop master, which is a different person, opened the safe, handed the firearms. So I guess it was the ammunition on the cart. Handed the firearms to Hannah. All right. At this point, she selected really interesting. This is a replica. It's a Pietta Long Colt 45 caliber revolver. It's a beautiful weapon. Mm-hmm. Very common in Westerns. Mm-hmm. And I think, so let's spend a little time on this because this is important to what happens. So she hands this weapon to Dave Hall. So that's where we'll stop that. We'll take a tangent into the weapon. We'll come back to her hand the gun to Dave Hall's. So this single-action revolver, originally made in the 1800s, the strength was always a challenge with firearms, like the strength of the frame. A lot of people think of the swing out cylinder in revolvers, right? You push it out.
Yeah. And you push the button and the cylinder comes out and you can look at all the...
Yeah, you can see them all.
Yeah,
Real stereotypical Western kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and the ejector, you push it back from this way, it comes up, and you can get all 6, if it has 6. Some have more or less. You can eject all the cases, the spent cases, pretty easily.
But that wasn't typical of the guns of the actual era.
Right. So that's actually a weaker gun because the way it's designed, and there's also a break barrel, which is even weaker. You can just break it down,
Like the British Schofield had that design.
Yeah, it's a little, back now it's safe, but back then it weakened the frame. So the Pieta, and many at the time, is solid frame. The cylinder stays in the frame all the time. Yeah. You can't swing it out. It's not designed that way. Mm-hmm. All you can do is rotate it and open the loading gate. You can only inspect one chamber at a time.
It's a little gate that folds out to the side and gives you a shot at one cylinder. And there's a lever or a rod on
ejector rod
that you use to pop the
shell
out one at a time. You pop the shell out, rotate, pop the next shell out, rotate, do that. And when you're putting rounds in, you do the same thing, which is why it took forever to reload in a battle situation, which is why you wanted to have more rounds
or more guns.
Right,
that was the typical strategy: is carry more than one revolver.
Well, pirates did the same thing. Like
before they only
had the one shot, they would carry like 6, 7 pistols on them at one time. I think Blackbeard was supposed to have like 12 on him at one point. Like some of the stories, like he had 12 pistols on him at any given time. So he'd just be pulled, boom, and throw it down, and boom, and throw it down.
Yeah, because it would take a minute or 90 seconds to load those, even the pistols. So, yeah, so this revolver, another thing about it's important to understand is it's single action. Mm-hmm. So in all the movies these days, you don't see those. I mean, Westerns you do, but in modern movies, everybody's familiar with the double action, which was actually very technically difficult to make. Again, the strength of steel and the engineering that was available, like to machine those parts. The first double action revolver, I think, came out in around 1854, if I'm not mistaken. There was actually one that came out in 1889 called, I think it was the Colt 1889. That was pretty well regarded. But when you're out there in the Old West, reliability is your friend. Mm-hmm. That was fancy, double action.
Oh, yeah.
So that's where you pull the trigger, cylinder rotates, the hammer comes back. And when you reach the throw all the way, trigger releases, or hammer releases.
Which then strikes the primer and
discharges the weapon. With a single action, you have to pull the hammer back, usually with your thumb. That rotates the cylinder, and it locks back. The hammer locks back. Mm-hmm. So you have a pretty light trigger pull on many of them because all the work has been done by your thumb.
Yeah, you've already pulled the spring back to its most tense, so all you have to do is release that. Interesting. Many of the guns, the single-action revolvers at the time, the backside of the sight picture was actually on the hammer. And it was designed so that if the hammer was already forward, you couldn't really see it. But once you pulled the hammer back, you now had a sight picture. Like you could look at it, and then you pull the trigger, and it discharges. It's going to hit whatever you were just aiming at.
Yeah. Now, one thing that those I like the old single actions. One bad thing about them, of course, is with many of them, early ones, if you hit the back of the hammer really hard, it could discharge. Yeah. Right. Now
especially if the spring was loose, if it was a looser spring, then the hammer wasn't sitting in a secure position. And if you smacked it wrong, it was just enough play to hit that primer. Yeah. So like,
people in the Old West would leave that particular round cartridge out of the chamber, which was smart. So you only had 5. Newer weapons have a transfer bar. You can hit it all you want. It's not gonna discharge. I wouldn't do it, but it shouldn't discharge.
So on the set, they were using the single action, right? So somebody actually had to pull it back.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And it requires a fair amount of force. Like, it's not something you can accidentally do. You wouldn't be holding it and be like, how'd that happen? Like, you would know it. It also clicks pretty loudly. And, of course, the cylinder rotates. You can, there's a lot of cues. Yeah. So this was also a cross-draw. So in this scene, moving back, Dave Hall's handed the weapon. He then hands it to Baldwin and says, "Hold gun." Baldwin puts it into a holster. I don't know what hand we're talking about, but I'm just going to pretend it's he's right-handed. I don't know. So it's a cross draw, right? So if you're seated, it's very hard to draw from your hip. It's much easier to do a cross draw. You come across your body. So he came across and pointed it at the camera. At some point, he must have pulled the hammer back with his thumb.
Right.
Probably as he was doing this motion. Halyna was behind the camera. I imagine doing one of these things like we were looking through to get the shot.
Probably doing it to line up, because supposedly it was the practice shot. It was lining up so that they could get the good shot. Because typically what would happen is that there's, on most movie sets, most armorers and prop masters are really strict with the safety of firearms. You never point a gun at another person. There's always camera angle tricks and other editing issues that can be done to make it look like you're pointing a gun at somebody. If you're trying to get a down the barrel shot, you can point the gun at the camera as long as there's no one behind the camera or in like 10 to 20 feet of the camera on either side. That should have, and that's what it should be always. But when they were practicing that shot, like they were still setting up the shot, and they told them to practice and bring it up. The best practice for that would have been for him to use his fingers to line up the shot, and then for them to step back, because they can have a monitor looking at that camera off to the side in a safe position. And then he could draw and pull and practice and say, okay, we got a good shot, or no, we need to readjust, put it away, and then go readjust.
Even if you felt compelled to use the gun, which I agree, the fingers would have been safer. They rarely shoot, right?
Mine haven't yet.
Fingers typically stay attached. At least don't pull the hammer back. And keep your finger off the trigger.
Keep your finger off the trigger.
I wonder if, because of the low budget of it, I wonder if having things like monitors attached to the cameras just wasn't something that they were practicing, whether for budget or just for these safety concerns they had. So I wonder if that's something that is normally practiced, just for safety's sake, but wasn't necessarily here, or they weren't too concerned about it just because they were practicing. Baldwin was practicing his movements. But it seems like something that should have been, certainly could have been avoided, of course, but they could have taken some kind of measure, like you said, Mike, to make sure no one was in the line of this gun.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been happy as well, like from Halyna's position or Joel Souza, at having a gun. Not that it was their fault, but you see him pointing the gun.
Yeah.
Whoa, like, what are you doing?
Right. I mean, that should have been. It's like, hey, let's practice this move. Well, hold on a second. Let us get out of the way before you do that. Should have been that, and there should have been the armorer on set with even a cold gun. Should have been on set with an eagle eye on that weapon, and if he reached for it and she saw that there were people where he was going to be pointing it, should have been like, "Whoa, stop! Hard stop! Let's clear these people out before we start pointing the gun in that direction."
Yeah, there's so many things that it takes there's so many steps it takes to shoot somebody with a gun, and if you never point it at somebody, even if it accidentally discharges or negligently discharges, that's scary, but you'll probably be okay. Could ricochet, whatever, but they're much less powerful than a direct hit. So you have all these different failures: gun loaded, gun pointed at a person, hammer pulled back. These guns don't have a safety, and the trigger pulled.
The safety is the heavy pull of that hammer.
You could think of it that way, yeah. Yeah, because you can pull the trigger all you want. When it's down, it's not going to...
The intentionality that's involved in that's required for that. Yeah.
I mean, plus, like, the safety wasn't necessarily the primary goal of the firearms manufacturers at the time that they were manufacturing these particular weapons, because they're like, if you're going to use it, your intent is to kill somebody. Most of the time with pistols, that's true, because pistols are very rarely used in hunting. I mean, you can, but...
Yeah. I would say for the Old West, the pistol was used to stop people from killing you or robbing you, maybe like animals that would come close, like your rifle, your shotgun. But most of their hunting would be with a rifle. Vast majority, or like a shotgun if it's like birds or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're shooting at birds, the coach gun would have been it was a pure self-defense gun. That was a shotgun with a shorter barrel, and it was a coach gun because it was used by the protection on a stagecoach, which is actually the term where we get the term shotgun, right? If you're going out to with friends and they're driving and you got a couple of other friends, you're like, shotgun, that means you get the passenger seat. That position was on the stagecoach, was next to the driver, and their job was to carry that coach gun. And it needed to be a shorter barrel for the quick movement to acquire target if you were being attacked by bandits.
Yeah, a lot of combat.
Very rarely Native Americans.
A lot of combat back then was very close range. The movies sometimes make it look like they're shooting from miles away. They weren't.
Yeah.
It was like 5-10 feet. Because those weapons aren't really necessarily too accurate either, those old revolvers. They're not like modern
They're
weapons.
way more accurate than the old muskets and, and
Smooth bore.
pistols, the smooth bore ones, but they weren't super accurate. No,
Yeah, and
except for the rifles. The rifles were pretty damn accurate.
you could do pretty well with the rifle. Lever action, like a Winchester 30-30.
Winchester 73. The 73 Winchester is the gun that won the West. Like,
Wasn't there a movie with Jimmy Stewart with that? That was a pretty good film. I saw it years ago.
I actually own one, a 73 Winchester.
Yeah, it's a fine weapon.
It is.
You can't go wrong with lever action.
Can't. No, lever action is wonderful. And the wonderful thing about that gun is it's heavy, which means there's very little in the way of recoil. Like it's so heavy with all the steel that it has and the wood that when you pull the trigger, even though it's a very powerful round that it's firing, there's very little in the way of pushback. Like I had my cousin actually was in the military, got used to firing M16s on some ARs. He's used to the recoil on some of those weapons. I was at a range with my Winchester, just shooting paper, and he was there. I was like, "Hey, you want to try this?" He's like, "I've never shot one of these before." I'm like, "Okay." So I showed him how to load it and how to acquire the sight picture, and he's like, "All right." And he kind of like leans forward, bracing himself with this thing because he's sure that it's just going to kick him in the shoulder like a mule. And he pulls the trigger and it goes pop. And he's like, slowly turns and looks at me like, what? Like he was so surprised. It had less recoil than his AR, just because it's big and heavy, but accurate as anything. This was a weapon that they were using to hunt regularly. And then could take down bear and buffalo. Yeah. And your occasional stagecoach robber.
And it's very reliable, the lever action. Yeah, very reliable, very straightforward, easy to maintain. That's a great weapon. Yeah.
The Henry repeating rifle was the first of those lever action weapons. They became really popular.
Yeah, I think there was a Henry in Unforgiven. I think that was the weapon that, spoiler alert for 1992 Unforgiven, that Clint Eastwood used to kill one of the offenders.
The big thing you can
was
tell
it Henry or Spencer? I can't remember.
Henry.
Was it a Henry?
Yeah. The big way you tell the Henry is that the lever tends to be bigger.
Bigger loop.
Bigger loop. Yeah. Like the Winchesters are always like just the size of your three fingers, so you can rack it out and back. The Henry tended to be a bit bigger. You had to make a bigger throw with it.
Yeah, I think you can. I wouldn't recommend this, but some of those people, they could swing the gun around.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend.
That's a good way
either.
to not have an arm.
Yeah,
I think that Schwarzenegger did that in Terminator 2.
Terminator 2. Yeah,
the shotgun, lever action shotgun.
It was a lever action shotgun. Yeah.
Yeah, don't ever do that.
They can do all
Made it look
sorts
just
of things.
seamless. And,
They can do all sorts of things with the real prop weapons when it's especially
done
when it's
properly.
Done properly, handled properly. When it's not an actual weapon, but a like rubber, that you can spin that around really easy because it weighs less than nothing, and you're not going to risk shooting your arm off. And if you drop it, it's just going to bounce. But it looks exactly like the one you just fired a shot out of, and that's some of the movie trickery they can do. Very often, if a shot requires someone to be pointing a gun at somebody else, they're actually pointing off to the side. They're not anywhere near pointing it, but from the camera angle, it looks like I'm pointing it directly at your face.
Right.
But we're off to the side, especially with lighting and things like that. Other times, it's a matter of like, okay, so you film your reaction stuff first, and then I come in, you're not even there, and I'm pointing at the spot where you were. And I do my stuff, and then in editing, they just superimpose the two images, and then it's pointing that they're directly at that spot.
Yeah.
All sorts of
Work
movie
some
trickery.
magic there.
Yeah, they work a lot of magic.
Yeah, so I just looked it up. It was actually a Winchester 1866 that they disguised to look like a Henry. So you're right, Henry.
It was supposed to be a Henry.
Schofield was the pistol.
Yeah.
The Schofield kid. Yeah.
Yeah, the Schofield was the first of that.
There
break
was
action.
there was a Spencer. Yeah, there's also a Spencer 1860 saddle ring carbine. So it had both. Actually had a Henry and a Spencer.
Nice.
I remember them referring to both in the movie. They referred to pretty much all the guns in the movie, except I don't think they mentioned the shotgun.
No.
But, yeah. So anyway, moving back to
There's a little tangent about firearms and whatnot, but it's very pertinent to the discussion of what
story.
happened on set.
well, all those details that we just mentioned will be brought up in court if this goes.
Right.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
they will certainly, because now they're civil. So either way, they will be. All right. So we see here that at this point, a cross draw, and Baldwin points, pulls the trigger. Halyna is struck once in the chest. The bullet actually, 45 long Colt, powerful cartridge.
Yes, it is.
Especially at I think this was supposed to be 2 to 3 feet. This wasn't like across the room.
They're a small church, too.
Yeah.
He was supposed to shoot his way out. Harland Russ, the character, was supposed to shoot his way out against a marshal and a sheriff, I think. So this was part of that scene. He shoots Halyna, bullet goes through her, strikes Souza in the shoulder. He wasn't really, he was injured, but it wasn't.
His wasn't really life-threatening.
Right.
Doesn't sound like it. So she drops to the ground, said she couldn't feel her legs. She would die shortly after. Baldwin, I don't have his exact response here, but it was something like, "What just happened?" Something like that, like an exclamation.
You can kind of hear him saying that, too. Like, just because his voice is very distinct, So that sounds like an Alec Baldwin response, especially because...
Wait, what just happened?
Yeah, well,
It's
because
just-
he didn't
especially
expect anything like that, of course.
Completely unexpected
Right.
from him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So everybody's lives changed in that instant. This was at 1:48 p.m. on October 21. And then, of course, we know from that point, we talked about the blame game and the lawsuits, and I'm sure there'll be more lawsuits. And then we'll see if there's any indictments handed down. If it even goes before a grand jury, we don't know what they're doing.
I think this one is a way more clear case of negligence on part of at least one specific person, if not two, than like the Brandon Lee case. Like Brandon Lee one was just that was a cluster F of stuff happening that happened over a much longer period of time.
Yeah.
That one's worth talking about as well. The Brandon Lee case.
Well, it was a case, people were upset because, Hollywood doesn't come, we talked about how they never come to Delaware.
Yeah.
Even though I would let them use this studio under certain conditions. But yeah, they don't come here. And they don't actually go to a lot of other states too often, right? California is where they, they do a lot of stuff. They do a lot of filming. Like the show Friends, New York City, was actually California. Except for the London. They actually went to London for those episodes. So North Carolina was very excited, right, to have Bruce Lee's son.
Back in '93, that was a huge deal.
Yeah, Bruce Lee, very popular.
North Carolina in the '90s, there was a lot of stuff being filmed in North Carolina. The state government was offering a lot of incentives to come film there. They filmed Forrest Gump primarily was filmed in North Carolina.
Was it North Carolina or Georgia? I don't know.
No, it was set in Georgia.
Oh, right.
It was filmed in North Carolina.
Even Vietnam was in North Carolina.
Even the Vietnam stuff was filmed in North Carolina.
Big field or something.
Yeah,
Across
it was right across from from the plantation. house.
Right.
Alabama was the setting.
Alabama was the setting, but it was filmed in North Carolina.
Yeah, I saw the making of it where they did the explosions.
Yeah,
it was.
It's like they get one shot at that too. Likewise, I think it was a little bit earlier than that, but Dirty Dancing is filmed in North Carolina. Parts of it were filmed in North Carolina as well, even though it was set in the Catskills.
It was in New York. Yeah,
set in the Catskills.
Based on, I think the writer of that. Did you see that one too? That was one of the. Yeah, that was pretty good. The writer kind of. I guess that was her experiences when she was young.
It was based on. It was semi-biographical for her, but Brandon Lee was going to be the son of famous Bruce Lee. He was going to be filming a movie in North Carolina. They were really excited about that.
Yeah, I think for that role, for the Crow, they had considered, I want to say they considered Johnny Depp.
I believe so. Like my Crow trivia, I'm not up on, but
Yeah.
I think Johnny Depp was at least considered or was asked before they got Brandon Lee.
Yeah, there was one other. It was Johnny Depp and somebody else really famous who was offered that role. I can't think of the other one's name. But they actually liked Brandon Lee because of the martial arts style. Mm-hmm. They didn't want a conventional like boxer. They wanted somebody who had the slick moves, like the kicks and everything. And he brought it.
He did.
You know, he was talented. So they was I think it was a 44 Magnum. I think it was a Model 629 Smith & Wesson. And it was a kind of a major part of the movie where his character is killed.
Right.
And becomes a ghost, and the ghost is the Crow. And
yeah,
that's... So they used a... Well,
with the production, the issues with that started with setting up a pawn shop scene. And several scenes in the movie that are set in a pawn shop. So they wanted to populate their set with a bunch of stuff from pawn shop. So they had one of their prop guys go out to a local pawn shop and just buy up everything they could. Some of the prop weapons that ended up getting used were purchased then. But the guy also ended up buying a couple of boxes of live ammunition, like real bullets. And he brought all the stuff back to the set, and they're setting things up, and the film's armorer comes along and sees this box of live rounds and opens it up, sees that they're live rounds. He goes, what the hell? And he raises holy hell. Mm-hmm. He's like, what the hell are these doing on the set? These are not supposed to be here. This is unsafe. It's terrible. So he takes them and puts them in the trunk of his car so that they're not on the set. And they sit there for the next 6 weeks. And then they're doing a shot with where they needed dummy rounds. Because the shot was down the barrel of the gun, and they needed to be able to see, because it's a revolver, it's a big revolver, so you can see the cylinder, you can see into each chamber. Mm-hmm. So they want to get a shot with them, but they didn't have any dummy rounds of the right size. That's when the armorer remembered, I got some in the trunk of my car. So he goes to the trunk of the car, and he and one of his assistants spend like an hour or so pulling the bullets out, pouring the powder out of them, and then putting them in the gun and discharging them safely into, like, I think it was a bucket full of dirt or something. Like, they were discharging them so that all of the primers were struck. Mm-hmm. They missed one. And they were then putting the bullets back in. So they had dummy rounds. They didn't have a way of just removing the primers, but a struck primer has a dent in it. So you can clearly see that this has been struck
with a firing pin.
The firing pin puts a pretty decent dent in the base of it. So they put the lead tips back in, the bullets back in the casings, and had a bunch of dummy rounds. So they loaded those dummy rounds into the gun for this shot, this down the barrel shot. And the actor was supposed to fire it, pull the hammer, give a couple of different reactions to it. It was a double action weapon, but he was supposed to pull the hammer back and cycle through a couple of times and then just cycle through so they could have a variety of shots to pick from in editing. One crew member said they heard a pop on one of those. Nobody else heard it. But what it was the round that they missed the primer on, the hammer struck the primer and the primer discharged, and it shot the bullet, just enough power to dislodge it out of the casing and down the barrel of the gun, but not enough to get it to go out of the barrel. Everybody, then I think it was the sound guy, the guy who was holding the key grip, one of the sound guys who actually had earphones on was listening. I think he was the one who heard the pop because he's got a gigantic microphone on a stick. Yeah, he'd hear it, but he didn't think much of it. And the armorer took the weapon back, secured all the dummy rounds. Oddly, didn't notice that one of them was missing the lead tip when he emptied the thing out. Then later, they used the same gun. I think it was a few days to a week later. They were filming the scene with Brandon Lee where he was supposed to get shot.
Yeah, it comes into his apartment.
Yeah.
And this was actually an early scene.
Yeah, it was one of the earliest scenes, but they'd filmed most of the rest of the movie. So, and this is one of the reasons why why they changed some of the things and why you don't point a gun at an actor, why you point off to the side or something, was because of the Brandon Lee thing. Because the actor who had the gun pointed it at him, and it was filled with quarter load blanks, which is quite a bit of powder in the gun. And in a normal gun, like those blanks are made with a mixture of clean burning powder, like fast burning powder, smokeless powder, and a little bit of high smoke black powder. Because what they want with a blank is a big expressive amount of flame coming out of the end and a lot of smoke, so that you can have it catch it on camera. It's very, very theatrical. It's a lot of energy coming out of the end, but in general, if you're more than 6 or 7 feet away, you're probably going to be okay. Although they still might put a little bit more distance in for that, but it's still enough power, and that bullet was still lodged in the barrel. So when the actor pulled the trigger, it was like it was a actual round loaded into that, a quarter load blank, sending enough powerful gas down the barrel to propel that bullet out, and it struck Brandon Lee in the chest. And he was fatally wounded. He ended up dying from his wounds.
Yeah, if I remember right, he fell backwards, and the scene called for him to fall forward, and people thought he was joking around. And they went over, and he was shallow, rapid breathing. He was unconscious, and they saw blood. Like, just had no idea. Didn't even occur to them that he'd been struck with a 44 caliber bullet. Yeah, he did not survive.
He did not, and I think they ended up refilming that scene with one of his stunt doubles, but shooting from behind. And they did not use his actual death scene in the movie. Like that would have been a little bit morbid and maudlin, but they decided not to use that and used a different angle.
Obviously, they were able to finish the movie.
They did finish the movie. Yeah.
Filmed already that they could make it work.
That was one of the last scenes that was being filmed. That's the thing about movies; you very rarely film them in sequence.
Yeah. Yeah. So back then, times have changed now, but back then, when you had a fatality on set, you released the movie. Yeah. Rust was canceled. Maybe just because it was a terrible movie, separate of what happened. I don't know. But normally, you keep making the movie. Actually, people, not so much in firearm accidents, but in other ways, people die on many different movies. There was one, Indiana Jones 5, somebody just died. It's natural causes in an apartment, but many movies have people killed in the takedown of a set. Somebody was actually injured in the takedown of Rust, a spider bite.
There was a Ryan Reynolds movie recently. I think it was one of the Deadpool movies, but it could have been one of the other action movies, where a stunt woman was killed in a motorcycle accident on set, and that movie was released.
Yeah, traditionally they are. They're very expensive projects. Yeah. These are financially significant, and
a particular movie like Rust, though, is like one in comparison to other major motion pictures. The cost is negligible. I mean, like you said, each episode of The Crown, $13 million. This film, $7 million. There are some quote unquote low budget movies coming out of Hollywood studios that have a $50 million budget. It's like, hey, that's low in comparison. And some of the Marvel movies have like $300-400 million budgets. Like, they're humongous budgets.
I think years ago, Titanic had a $300 million.
Yeah,
like 20, whatever it was, 20 years ago.
I mean, and then there's some movies like the Avatar sequels that are just like the budget keeps growing because they're just letting James Cameron do whatever he wants on them, and then he's just like, I need more money, and they're like, okay, James, here you go. Here's more money.
They measure increases in tens of millions. In Rust, it sounds like they were fighting over every quarter.
Yeah, they were fighting over, like, you need, what? $15 for the vending machine? No,
for quarters? I don't think so.
Quarters? You need 15 quarters for what? Parking? Nah, get out of here. Tell him to carpool in.
I was looking at Alec Baldwin's list of movies that he's been a producer on, and it's a lot of, I was surprised, I didn't know this, but a lot of documentaries and a lot of TV shows as well. Some movies, not a lot recently. So like we're looking back like 2003, 2008, 1999, things like that. So it makes me wonder if he was really trying to make a name for himself by like doing a lower budget thing and hoping that he could kind of build up from there. And so I wonder if that's why, due to inexperience, maybe from him, maybe from people around him that weren't like getting paid as much as other people might. I wonder if that has something to do with the oversights in things, so not hiring someone who's experienced enough to be the armorer, or having so many producers because maybe he wasn't really sure what to do, perhaps, or maybe this was a new experience for him in particular. Mm-hmm. So yeah, he's a well-known actor, but I wonder if he's trying to build up his chops with producing, but oversights, which would be, I think, probably common, right? You got to learn somehow, but obviously you can't skimp on the really important things, like making sure the set is safe, making sure live bullets aren't actually there, making sure the armorer knows what they're doing, things like that. Mm-hmm. Hannah Gutierrez Reed, had expressed in September on a podcast that she might not be ready to be the armorer for Rust. And, that's pretty scary. Of course, in hindsight, we're like, well, yeah, okay, we can see that. But that's a pretty scary thing. I imagine that somebody working on that set, actors and everybody else, might hear that and think, she doesn't think she's ready for this, and
Makes you feel safe, right?
And it's unfortunate, right? That she didn't feel ready. But she's like, oh, I'm just going to do it, right? I'm just going to learn how to whatever,
To be fair, in some ways, like there are some things you can't prepare for. You just have to do it to get better at it.
Yeah.
But I don't think being an armorer is one of those things necessarily. No. I mean, you don't. This was one of her first films being head armorer. Like she was in charge. She'd worked on other movies as an assistant. Probably worked with her dad quite a bit.
Yeah,
and that's, I think, what gave her some pedigree and gave her some experience, and that's great. But 24 years old.
It's very young to be running around.
To be in charge of everything.
Yeah, with that much responsibility, I don't know. I mean,
if she was 24 years old and had a list of 500 movies that she'd been an assistant on, okay, sure, you've been 500 movies.
Yeah.
If your list of credits as assistant armorer is less than 50 at 24 years old, I'm questioning whether you should be head armorer.
Can you really master anything at 24? I mean, I'm sure there are some trades, but that's not a lot. And I think what worries me most about that particular age, a young age like that, is the maturity issue. And I think that's what really people are focusing on, and I think maybe rightly so. Mm-hmm. Before we get to more about Gutierrez Reed, I did want to finish up with the Crow and the prosecution, right? So North Carolina doesn't get a ton of movies. We talked about what happened. Clearly, my opinion, people were criminally responsible. I don't see how you escape that. They decided essentially that it was too complex to put before a jury, and no one would understand, how the death was foreseeable. That was the same thing that we would see earlier with the Twilight Zone, right? Like it's just foreseeable. How is it foreseeable? The jury got stuck on that case. So prosecutor decided, considering what happened to John Landis, he was acquitted, and the other people were acquitted on Twilight Zone, the movie. He's like, no, I don't think a jury can understand all the stuff with the cartridges and the case and the powder, and it's just all so complex.
I think it was just that that all of these steps happened over a long period of time. It's just a confluence of events. They were just like, any jury's going to look at this and be like, this is clearly an accident. Like, yeah, some things should have been done, but weren't, but that doesn't necessarily make them criminal offenses, and they would get hung up on that. You can't foresee this happening. Now, I would argue that any armorer worth their salt should be cleaning the weapons anytime they've been used, at least a cursory throw the thing down the barrel, and that should tell you, hey, there's something obstructing. Let's clear this out.
Yeah, the mistake, you could simplify this. Like if you're presenting this to a jury, I get that it's complex, but juries here, like these racketeering cases, they're pretty complex with overseas finance and interest rates and all this stuff. I mean, I think they could have handled it. But you would say, you would just look at a specific failure, like how did this person fail? Who checked the barrel? Who was responsible to check the barrel? Who didn't do that, It's just boom. Okay, there it is.
Just look at the facts.
Yeah, it's negligent.
To be fair to the armorer on that particular case, when they're doing the dummy shot, that's supposed to be a cold gun, right? It's not supposed to have anything. It didn't have anything actively fired through it. Why should I clean the gun? It's already clean. If I pick a gun up out of a gun safe and handle it and kind of cycle the cylinder a couple of times, I don't clean it before I put it back in the safe. And it's kind of the same thing. There's no firing of the weapon as far as he was aware. So there's no powder that's gone down the barrel. It doesn't necessarily need to be cleaned. So it's just checked as safe.
Yeah, but checking as safe again, involves all 6 cylinders.
Yes.
And the barrel.
Yeah, it should.
And the barrel's hard, but that's a swing out cylinder gun, 629 Smith & Wesson. Like you can just pop that out. You need a rod or something. Like don't put your eye up to that, but get a rod or something or a mirror.
There's also a neat little tool. My dad has one. It's plastic J hook that actually is made of clear plastic that the ends fluoresce if light is. So you can look down from the side and put the J hook in and just put it in the light, and you should be able to see the light from the end of it in the barrel if it's clear. You're not putting anything. You're not looking down the barrel.
Right, yeah, don't do that. Yeah,
you don't have to do that at all. You just doop. Yep, I can see. Yeah. So it's clear. If even that had been done, Brandon Lee would still be alive.
Yeah, white paper and a mirror. You can see the full picture and make sure there's not like a ring or something caught in there. Like you want to. The entire barrel needs to be clear. You see the rifling. But that wasn't done. And I think if the prosecutor had centered on that and not worried so much about the other complexities, I think it could have been a prosecution that was successful. Mm-hmm. But it set a precedent. So everything fell apart with Twilight Zone. That was a very expensive trial in California.
Which, for those who don't know, the Twilight Zone incident, it was a helicopter crash.
Right, 1982 in, what was that called? Indian Dune, a very famous area of California where tons of episodes are shot because it has everything, jungle, desert, forest. And it was, now some people said the pronunciation is Morrow, Vic Morrow. I always say Vic Morrow, but apparently it was like Russian or something, Vic Morrow. Either way, Vic and 2 children who were extras, who John Landis actually broke the law. He was never charged with it. It was an oversight prosecution. He looked at those characters and he's like, well, we're shooting at night. And the labor board isn't going to let us do that with children because they have rules. But they're not talking, so I can get around the union and call them extras. So he had like a producer, associate producer or something, I forget, another position, go out and get it. A guy named Folsey goes out and gets the kids, tells the parents, we're going to be paying them under the table illegally for this. And the parents are okay with it. But they didn't know about the helicopter and the explosives. They were actually there on set. So I forget what day it was in 82. It was 1982. And they're filming the scene at night, like 2-something in the morning. And there was a mortar, which is, big mortar with explosives, fires up in the air, loaded heavily for this scene where this village in Vietnam was supposed to blow up. Of course, it wasn't in Vietnam, but and this helicopter with American soldiers supposed to be chasing Vic Morrow, and as he's carrying these 2 kids across a river. That was the scene. So he's carrying them across, downdraft, helicopters strafing them. Behind them, the village blows up. Mm-hmm. Helicopter pivots for a shot. Pilot's name was Wingo. He was a Vietnam veteran pilot, and takes out the tail rotor, blows it clear off the helicopter. So with no anti-torque, starts spinning,
right?
Comes down, main blade, decapitates Vic and one of the children because he had dropped the other one in the water by accident. That child was crushed by a landing skid. So they all died pretty much the same moment with the parents, and John Landis, and Folsey, and everyone else watching them. Yeah. Terrible. So they prosecuted that case. It was 5 of them. And I think only 3 had something like involuntary manslaughter. The other was like negligent homicide. And all not guilty for everything. Prosecution was so confident, never charged them with the labor violations, which was a slam dunk. They admitted to it on the stand. Yeah. And I think that soured movie set convictions forever. That case was so expensive, and John Landis was, in my opinion, very arrogant. And he's like, I'm paraphrasing, he basically said, I don't have time for this manslaughter stuff. I'm a busy person. I'm an important person. And here you are wasting my time. He invited the jury to a screening of Coming to America, which was a movie he made when he was waiting, when the trial was 9 months.
Yeah.
So I think at that point, it was
Coming to America is just a great movie.
Oh, it was a good movie.
Again,
I don't
Eddie
like
Murphy.
Landis, but
Eddie Murphy.
I liked Eddie Murphy. Yeah, and actually, that movie, that wasn't their script. They had stolen that from somebody else who sued them successfully later and won $150,000.
Ah.
Now, if you look at it, though, they clearly added dialogue, but the general idea of a prince from a country in Africa who comes to America, that was somebody else's idea.
Only 150,000?
I was surprised by that, but it was just the other writer, I guess, just had the frame.
Yeah.
Not the witty dialogue between Arsenio Hall and Eddie Murphy, and every actor in that movie was
Eddie
good.
Murphy and Eddie Murphy and Eddie Murphy.
Yeah,
And Eddie Murphy.
that was a
And Arsenio
criticism.
Hall.
That was a criticism. People thought that was a little much.
I thought it was great.
I thought it worked.
I thought it was absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, everybody in that movie did a great job.
I thought it was a bit much when he did that same thing in The Clumps, but it worked in Coming to America.
Yeah. Was it McDonald's? Was that the
McDowell's?
And he would always emphasize
It's McDowell's. It's not the golden arches. It's the golden arcs.
and the photographers from McDonald's were they hired investigators to take pictures. He's chasing them away or whatever. Yeah, that was great. Yeah,
One of Sam Jackson's first movies.
that's right. He was the armed robber.
Yeah, he was the armed robber.
Yeah, so those two writers never worked again in Hollywood
Wow.
because of the allegation of the stolen script. I don't think they knew about it. I think they were handed like the idea and didn't know where it came from. But yeah, it was a Movies That Made Us episode.
I love that episode. It was pretty good.
That's a great series in general.
Yeah, very to the point, like succinct, but tons of information at the same time.
yeah.
It's witty too, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, keeps moving.
Yeah.
Who was the guy who was that actor? Louis Anderson?
Louis Anderson, yeah.
I never even thought of him as that role was being significant, and it made his career blow
It
up.
made his career, yeah. And all because he bought Eddie Murphy lunch. Like he was in the restaurant, and Eddie Murphy and Eddie's crew came in and they were in the same restaurant, and he just happened to recognize him. And I told the manager, like, put his meal on my credit card. Like everything is on me.
It was like a couple $100 or something.
It was like $350 or something like that. Yeah. And he's like, "This is the best $350 I ever spent," because like Eddie like really appreciated that, and then offered him that little role in that movie.
I think he even made that role for him, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
He created that role specifically for him as a thank you.
Right.
And it launched his career.
They interviewed Landis for that. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you caught it. It was subtle, but they kind of exploited it a little bit on the show. Like, highlighted it, which I thought was actually fitting. He didn't want to say
Right. He didn't want to introduce himself.
standard intro that they always use.
Right. Yeah. And in every episode of that show, they have the director introduce themselves, say who they are and what they directed. John Landis like, do I really have to do that? Like, everyone should already know who I am. Like, I'm a household name.
Haven't you seen the trial?
I'm a household name. You might have been a household name in the 80s. People don't know who you are anymore.
No. He's not. I mean, he's famous. He's notorious. But he's not like, no one looks for him to direct movies anymore. He was actually somewhat talented. But I thought it was interesting that he still kind of came off arrogant, even in that little Netflix show or moderate size show. So back to Gutierrez Reed. You were talking about Jeff, how she was on a podcast saying that, wasn't really sure she knew what she was doing. Paraphrasing. So, and you were thinking, like, you were talking about, Mike, like what occupations that would be okay for. Some fields maybe, but other fields not so much.
Yeah. So
I was thinking, like, what if you were on an airplane, right? The pilot comes over they do the thing at the beginning. Thanks for, flying ABC Airlines and your trip to Miami. Wow, there's a lot of blinky lights in here and dials, but I'm going to try to get you there. Whoops, wait, that's the wrong button. Oh, just kidding. Maybe not. Like there would be a point where you're like, you know what? I'm getting off the plane.
Yeah. Where's the exit? Right.
I see it more a little more like the captain, like instead of coming over the line, it's your captain speaking. We're at 30,000 feet. Like that's the kind of thing you always hear. But like instead of that, he comes out of the cockpit, just like in a Hawaiian shirt, just leaning on seats in first class. Like, hey guys, what's going on? I'm your captain. What's going on here? Mimosa? That's great. Awesome. Like, so we're going to be landing in Florida in the next, call it hour and a quarter.
And don't worry about the co-pilot. He's asleep.
Don't worry about him. He's sleeping. That's the kind of vibe I got. Best. That's the kind of vibe I got off of Halyna Gutierrez. Read that she was super happy. She may have been really good at what she does in general, but she was super excited to be in that role and just cut a few corners. Was just, hey, I'm on an Alec Baldwin movie. Like,
well, didn't somebody say she was using a rifle to prop up something or to prop herself up? There was one report where they were talking about, just very casual with the guns. And they couldn't believe it. Like, you're using the gun like a cane. I forget what it was, but it was disrespecting the weapons.
Yeah. There are some people who have grown up around weapons I grew up around weapons. I started shooting at ranges when I was like 5 or 6 years old. As soon as I was old enough to hold a .22 rifle, my dad had us down there.
It's one of the best.
It is.
The
it's
22,
amazing.
like you can't.
Quintessential.
But I remember every weekend, we'd go every Saturday to go shooting. And every Saturday, my dad, before we even got out of the car to go shoot, would go over the range rules with us. Every Saturday. Every single time. It was a point, like I had the little like Nerf guns and the little like rubber suction cup guns. My dad was so heavy on gun safety. I wasn't even allowed to point those at a living creature. And it's like, you can point that at the TV. You can point it at a mirror or window. Do not point it. Don't even point it at the cat. Like, load it or not. You treat it just like you would treat a live weapon.
Because the cat might draw on you.
Right? Like the cat might draw on me. Like, oh God.
You know how cats are.
Yeah, I know how cats are. I got 6 of them. But there are other people whose parents were not that like militant. And I think that's the difference between some of the armorers in Hollywood and Halyna Gutierrez Reed. Is some of these armorers are super militant about the rules. You follow the rules. You follow these safety protocols. I do things differently from other armorers, but here's the safety protocols, and they go through them. Like I think for what movie was it? I think it was The Matrix. Before The Matrix, like all the cast members who would be dealing with firearms had to go through like a 2-week boot camp style safety protocol put on by the armorer. Like he drilled them daily for 2 weeks on proper gun safety before they were ever allowed to touch a gun on set. And that guy's like, I don't care if you've been through this before, you're doing it again. Like that's a person who really, there were no accidents on that set as far as I'm aware.
Isn't it sad that, again, as far as we know, no accidents on John Wick movies, the Matrix movies, yet a $7.5 million Western with a handful of old guns. Right. There's a fatality, not even just an unintentional discharge.
Literally thousands of rounds fired.
You see The Matrix?
Matrix. Literally thousands of rounds fired in that movie. Not a single problem, as far as I'm aware. But we get a $7 million flick with probably what would have amounted to a couple hundred shots. Nothing. Like, and there's a fatality.
Yeah.
And again, it speaks to the lackadaisical attitude. I know I've met people in real life who grew up around guns so much they just don't have that any kind of respect for them. It's like, oh, that's my gun. Like it's laying on the back of the couch.
Wasn't that the Shanna Hubers? Shanna Hubers.
Shanna Hubers. Yeah.
We saw the same.
Ryan Poston kind of
just left it on the table.
Just
380 sitting.
Just what you would walk in his house, just drop his gun on the table. Like it's unsafe because there's such a casual disregard for it. Mm-hmm. You grow up with guns and don't have someone drilling you every time you're about to handle it with the proper safety protocols. And which the problem is, I don't think that Hannah Gutierrez Reed did grow up in that kind of household, because Thel Reed is her father. Like, he's one of those guys in Hollywood who's just like, safety, everything. Like, you be safe. And I think that's gonna be an issue. I think if she goes to trial for a criminal aspect, that's going to be brought up. Like, how do you not know the safety protocols when you grew up with this person as your parent?
I think she's going to have a tough time if they, let's face it. We know from covering so many cases that in many situations, it's not so much the jury guilty, not guilty. It's whether a prosecutor chooses to take the case before a grand jury. Grand juries are a joke. Some jurisdictions don't even have them, right?
In some jurisdictions, grand jury will indict anything that's put in front of them.
Yeah.
I think that's the joke in Chicago, is that a Chicago grand jury will indict a ham sandwich.
Yeah. I mean, originally, the founding fathers, I think, envisioned it as a check against overzealous prosecutors. But it's become a formality that just, something that can get reported, but it doesn't really matter. If a prosecutor wants to convict you of pretty much anything, they can do it. So the question is, do they want to bring charges or not? So that's the first thing. If they do, I mean, they're going to experience a vigorous defense, because Hollywood, there's going to be, there's a lot of emphasis on this case. I think a lot of people would like to see this go away. So it's going to be kind of clash of the titans. But I think either way, I think her career's done. I don't see her recovering from this.
I don't
done
either.
before it really started.
I don't either, especially since of how much coverage there is of this. If she, I don't see any studio agreeing to have her be an armorer for them again. Like, not that I think she would necessarily go on the fabled blacklist, but it would be like, you're the one who did that. Yeah, no, sorry. It reminds me of a Kevin Smith movie, Jersey Girl. You ever see that one?
I don't think I did.
It's a great movie. It's a wonderful Kevin Smith movie. It's very pithy dialogue. But Ben Affleck plays a record executive who, in the early '90s, his wife gives birth to their first child and dies in childbirth, and he's trying to take care of the baby at the same time as trying to launch a new album for Will Smith. This is just before Will Smith has gotten like a break after Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, before Independence Day, and like he's like Ben Affleck's character is like, he's so flustered with this loss and trying to deal with the baby and everything that he just, in front of the entire press, just blasts Will Smith out of the water. He's like, I guarantee you, Will Smith is never going to have a career as an actor, blah, blah, blah. And just goes off and trashes his client. And then for years throughout the movie, he's applying for positions at other firms. And like at one point, a bunch of executives bring him in for an interview, and he's all excited. He's like, God, this could be my chance. And they're like, and it's Matt Damon is one of the executives interviewing, so they get a chance to play opposite each other again. Yeah. But he's like, I wanted to find out if it was really you. Is it really you? He's like, I'm that guy. It's like, I knew it. Yeah, we're not going to hire you. We just wanted to see if it was really you. Apply. Yeah, but no, you're done in this business. Like, and he spent years trying to find a way back into that business. But he just because of what he did, it became so public, everybody knew he was out. Like, nobody was going to be willing to do business with him because he trashed his client. I think nobody's going to be willing to do business with Hannah Gutierrez Reed because of this incident.
I think the same thing could probably be said for Dave Halls because of his potential role in things. He was fired from a movie called Freedom's Path in 2019 after a gun went off unexpectedly. Various crew members had said from past movies he was a liability. They had warned producers of him. So I think his role is pretty significant as well. And so I think there's probably some past issues that are really coming to light that should have probably come to light a long time ago. But now that they're so out there, of course, everyone will know about it and be like, oh, no, there's no chance I'm going to hire that guy. He's got a record prior to even this incident, but just because of this one, no chance we're going to hire him.
Yeah, and there's a debate about whether he had any responsibility, like technically, morally. Everybody on the set should promote gun safety, but technically, was he supposed to do something with that, like check it? Some people say he wasn't, but then he yelled "cold gun." So whether he was or not, he took on.
He even said that he checked it.
He said he didn't check it properly. Right?
He told investigators that he checked it, that they had established a protocol between him and Hannah that anytime they were doing that, like she would load it and then hand it to him to check. And he would rotate the cylinders and double check for her. But he told investigators, I can't remember if I saw every cylinder.
I think in one report he actually said he failed to check every one.
Yeah.
So I think there was a not remember. I think there was a failed. So even if you give him the benefit of the doubt, that's not saying I don't remember isn't a great defense. Mm-hmm. It kind of sounds like you didn't.
Well, there's even disagreement, my understanding, between his lawyer and the affidavit that Dave Halls filed. So his lawyer said that he didn't hand the gun to Baldwin, but his affidavit said he did. So then he said that the lawyer said that Hannah handed it to Baldwin. So then, of course, Hannah's lawyer is like, well, listen, there were safety problems, and she's not to blame for it. The other problems on set were to blame, and she was just there, essentially. So the lawyers seem to be really, you talked about these conspiracy theories, and, so they seem to really be trying very hard to present some kind of picture about what this might have actually been, rather than what the truth might have actually been, of course. I mean, they're lawyers, so. I really hope that we can get to the bottom of this, kind of figure out what exactly actually happened, other than just Alec Baldwin saying what he wants to do and lawyers saying what they think should have been or what they think actually happened. I hope there's some kind of clear picture that's painted.
I don't think we're ever going to see a clear picture.
Maybe
I think
not.
we have the clearest picture we're going to see, and that's that something happened. Unless the police and investigators actually uncover this mysterious third party who actually came onto set and changed out one of the bullets after it was determined to be cold. Like then they did everything that they were supposed to, and then this other guy got a hold of it and changed one of the bullets out because, hey, Alec Baldwin happened to be over at the snack table and set the gun down just to grab something else. I don't think that actually happened because the catering table they had to take a bus to. That's right. But it's possible Alec had to go out, take a leak, and set the whole gun belt down, and somebody came along
and popped in
a live
happened to have it with them
and brought it around. But there were some indications that there had been live ammo on the set.
There was a rumor they had done target practice.
Yeah, there was a rumor that somebody at least was doing target practice on set, and there were live rounds. But if they find out something like that, if they investigate and find out something along those lines happened, then I would say that the responsibility on the part of Hannah Gutierrez and Joe Hall is mitigated to a point because somebody else deliberately made sure that there was a round in the chamber. I don't think that's the case, though.
Maybe it was. I was trying to think: is there any way where this isn't criminal? Like just trying to give them the benefit of the doubt, whether they're indicted or not. Like, is there some chain of events that could have occurred? And it comes down to, Baldwin pointing a gun right there. I have a problem with that no matter what. But let's say it was a ricochet. It wasn't. It was a direct fire, but say it was a ricochet. You think, okay, he didn't understand physics and geometry. And I struggled to find any way it didn't involve negligence. New Mexico, it's something like you have to have due caution and circumspection. So, an armadillo sneak on the set and load it okay, then I'll give it to you, but that doesn't happen. Right. Like a human being put a live cartridge in at least one of those chambers.
Mm-hmm. And the safety of everyone involved in a shot with in any kind of filming with any kind of weapon, be it cold or hot, the safety of that set is the responsibility of the armorer. That's their whole job, is to handle and is to safely handle all of the firearms. Whether it's a accidental bullet lodged in the barrel of the gun, or putting a live round in, or having blanks in a gun during a downtime period that the actor then puts to his head and pulls the trigger. The armor is responsible for that. If there was a lot of downtime, that gun should have been taken from Huxham and secured. Like him just being able to sit there playing with a gun that was loaded even with blanks was irresponsible. The armorer should have been like, okay, we're breaking to set up lighting. It's going to be an hour. Give me the guns. Like, let's put them on the cart. And when we're getting ready to shoot, we'll get them back out.
If nothing else with John Eric, wasn't he worried about the sound? Like, it's extremely loud.
That's the thing. I don't think he was intending to pull the trigger. I think he just had his finger on it, and when he put it to his head, like with the whole like, "Oh, I'm gonna pull my head up," like joking around, he ended up actually pulling the trigger. I think that was accidental, but he still shouldn't have had that gun in his hand at that time, because they weren't filming in that moment. They were taking a long break at the time, and he was freaking out about how long it was taking. So the armorer should have secured that gun. Mm-hmm. The armorer on the Crow should have checked the barrel for any obstructions. Hannah Gutierrez-Reed should have made sure there wasn't a live round in that gun. That's their job. She should have made sure that there was nobody behind that camera when they were going to be pulling a gun, cold or hot, and pointing it in that direction.
Yeah. Again, any one thing they did right, they could have saved Hutchins' life. Yeah. Like just one thing. Don't point the gun at her. Don't put a live cartridge in.
Do all the checks they said that they were doing or whatever.
Yeah. If nothing else, I mean, not that this is a perfectly safe way, but pull back the hammer a few times, like more than 6. Now, I'll always physically inspect it, but if you really want to be sure, that's another way just to make sure. Or to be somewhat sure. Because again, you could see it could misfire and then fire later on. So you're still not positive. But just to take it, just to draw it and pull the trigger, doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And Alec Baldwin, I've talked about this in my video. He's always been an anti-gun guy. So there is a lot of irony in somebody who's anti-gun who doesn't understand guns and is now saying, let's have police on site. He also said he's now interested in gun safety. It was his gun safety, lack of gun safety that contributed to
being inept at gun safety.
I'm always a proponent of anyone, even especially if you say you're anti-gun, trying it once. Just go out to a range with someone, learn the safe way of handling it, and shoot at least once, just at paper targets. There are many people who have done that, who were staunch anti-guns, who are like, wow, that was really fun. I really like that. If you still don't like it, still don't see a reason why, okay, that's fine. That is your opinion. It's wonderful. But if you do not have an experience with something and you're saying nobody should ever have this experience with it, that I do have some issue with that.
Right. Well, the thing is, in addition to all the rules we saw from years ago with the founding fathers, like militia and all that, and self-defense, there's a culture to it. It's a way of life, and anti-gun people. Again, I agree that's their prerogative, but they're talking about wiping out an entire culture. So at least understand the culture. At least So Alec Baldwin, okay. Understand how they work, but don't pull the hammer back, point a gun at somebody, pull the trigger, and then say, "I'm for limiting guns on sets." That wasn't a gun on set issue. That was a gun in the hand of Alec Baldwin issue. So
that was an armor with not enough experience issue.
Right. All of it, right? But if he hadn't have done that, Hutchins would be alive.
All of it was major issues. But the number one rule that my dad always taught us was every gun is loaded. Mm-hmm. Regardless of anything. He said, if you watch me unload a gun, open it up and put it on the counter, and you can see that there's no bullet in the chamber and there's nothing in there, and you go to pick it up, you treat it as if it's loaded. Because if you're treating it as if it is loaded with live ammunition, you're not going to be pointing it at people. And I understand the shot was supposed to be pointed at the camera, and there were people there though. If you're following that safe protocol, you say, hey, you want me to practice this? Can you clear out so nobody's in danger?
Also with a cross draw,
Right.
no one could be
Nobody should be
actually this way, all the way around. So basically no one in the area.
Nobody should be within 270 degree angle of anything. So yeah, even if the draw is going to be like that, there still shouldn't be anybody over in the front area, because that's the safe protocol. The fact that people get comfortable with this, hot and cold. This is a cold gun. That means it's safe. It's not.
No, it's loaded.
You don't treat it. It's loaded. It's always loaded. If it's rubber, it's not a gun. It's not a gun. That's safe, and that's something that some studios are starting to do.
Yeah, we talked about Dwayne Johnson.
Is they're actually getting like rubber guns that are blue. They look exactly like a gun. They're just blue, and there's no way you can, other than smacking somebody with it, you can't accidentally discharge a blue rubber toy prop. But the fact that it's blue means that during post they can computer animate a skin on it to make it look like a real gun. You can never tell the difference.
Well, in some productions where they use fake guns, it's horrible, like The Walking Dead. Like, I'm convinced they just stuck a flashlight in the barrel of a gun, and they're like blinking. It's like a yellow flashlight, and they're like, it was comically bad, and there's never any recoil. Now, Alec Baldwin practiced to get a recoil effect, even when the gun was cold, which is actually pretty hard to do, because it's hard to imitate that, because it's an external force in real life.
Right.
But can you imagine, like, we have all these actors being like, pulling the trigger and staying perfectly still? It's a sad day.
Arguably, it could be a little bit better than some of the actors who pull the trigger and blink every time they pull the trigger. Because that, to me, like, really? Like, especially when they're supposed to be like a highly trained, like, sniper or a police officer who's, or detective or something like that, who's been trained with using firearms.
Or they close one eye.
And then they pull it up and blink. Every time they pull the trigger, they're blinking, because the actor's not used to firing a gun. Mm-hmm. And to be fair on the closing an eye thing, I do that.
Goggles on.
I do that on occasion. You should have goggles.
Yeah,
on.
I always wear goggles because I would never take a chance and fire a gun without goggles.
Always wear eye protection. Always wear ear protection. Yeah. But I've been known to close an eye because I'm right-handed but left eye dominant. So if I bring my sight picture up, I don't get the right sight picture. So I close an eye to get the sight picture.
Yeah, in a perfect world, you could keep both eyes open and shift the view to the dominant. But with like rifles, you can't do that really, So
interesting little trick that I learned from a professional shooter was actually putting tape over just the quarter of the glasses. So like I can see normally just looking around, but when I bring the sight picture up, it's cloudy over just enough of my vision that my non-dominant eye gives me the sight picture. Takes over. So but it was just a little trick that I got shown in it, and it works.
Yeah. So in terms of, so we talked about Gutierrez-Reed, talked about Hutchins, Souza, Dave Halls. Obviously, Gutierrez-Reed, Hall's probably not going to work again. What about Alec Baldwin?
He'll work again. He will. I mean, I think that he's really devastated, I think, by the loss of Hutchins. I think they had a personal relationship. He said she was my friend. Mm-hmm. I think they had a decent working and professional friendship. So I think that he's struggling, but I think he'll work again. He might not do any movies with guns.
I was about to say, it'll probably change the type of movie he does, and probably he'll probably push for maybe a different message in the movie too. Perhaps one of maybe anti-gun or something like that.
I could see that happening. I could see him going over the top now.
Yeah.
Because now that message, in a sense, defends him. Like the gun was bad this whole time, and I was a victim of the gun. It took control of my mind or whatever. It gets into the magical thinking at some point. And I could definitely see him doing that.
I can see him, like, if there are going to be guns involved, not agreeing to do it or leveraging.
I could see his insurance company not agreeing to do it.
Leveraging his involvement to get a police officer on set, because he's made that statement. He's like, I'm not going to do it unless you got a cop involved on set to oversee the guns and stuff. And some studios be like, well, it's Alec Baldwin, so sure, we'll go for it. Other studios just be like, yeah, let's find somebody else.
Yeah.
It's like, well, our armorer used to be a cop. Does that do?
Wasn't he also in didn't he play a baby?
The Boss Baby.
Yeah.
He did the voice for
It was good in that.
Boss Baby movies.
I think, obviously, I've been around guns a long time. I have respect for them. So it's weird seeing somebody blame a gun when it looks to me like they're responsible. But you don't know what you don't know. And, I can give Alec Baldwin the benefit of the doubt and say, this is a guy who just didn't understand anything about guns. He was anti-gun, perhaps because he didn't have a clue. I mean, that contributed. Yeah.
You can say a gun has never jumped up off a table and shot somebody. A gun by itself has never killed anyone. It is always a human element involved. Even in a case where, hey, the gun fell off the counter and discharged. Why was it sitting on a counter loaded?
Mm-hmm. Unattended.
Mm-hmm. Like, it was an earthquake went off and it fell off the counter and discharged. Like, so why was it sitting on the counter loaded in the first place?
An armadillo attacked me and grabbed the gun.
A human being did that. There's always a human element in that, and when it happens as an accident, there's a human error involved.
Yeah, I hope that Baldwin can kind of own his behavior, because I think that's the way. Whether he wants to be anti-gun or whatever, that's fine. Is what it is. But I think he needs to own his behavior. I don't think it's going to be helpful to him to blame inanimate objects in this, or other people, even though they might be to blame. I think that ownership would be the smartest move. Also, I think the best for mental health to come back from this. The whole, pointing fingers, and it only gets worse as it goes to, civil court. And if it goes to criminal court, it gets even worse. But outside of that, I think it'd be helpful just to admit that he didn't understand how they worked or didn't care. And now I bet he does.
I think all the tweets and talking, whatever, like these impromptu interviews and all that kind of stuff, it seems to just be him. The message that's received, at least to me, is trying to say why it's not his fault, or trying to explain, and really what it just seems like is just trying to explain why he's not guilty, of anything. And that, of course, she was his friend, and he's really devastated by it and everything. And his wife and Hilaria saying everything she's saying really isn't helping anything either. And so I think you're right. If you just, this was a terrible mistake. And there was a lot of missteps here, a lot of things that were overlooked that could really have made a difference, and she might still be alive if those things were actually taken seriously. And a simple statement like that, instead of just, we need cops, instead of we need to fix this, whatever else. These kind of auxiliary messages that don't really get to the point of what actually happened and taking responsibility for it. A simple message could really just probably go far for him, and just kind of hang back after that.
Yeah, he probably needs to wait. He probably needs to say nothing until he gets through whatever trials, but after that, and I would agree, just own it, and don't ever blame anyone else. Just own your part and move forward. He must feel terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of what he's doing right now is trying to mitigate that sense of guilt he has.
It's denial.
Mm-hmm. He has a huge sense of guilt for what happened because his finger did pull the trigger.
Yeah, he's absolutely, there's a good chance he's in denial, right? Where he's just like, I'm not going to accept any responsibility. Not because of the lawyers and everything, just in the law. Just, I'm not going to, because I can't face that.
The big problem, this is my ultimate takeaway from this, is that he and a lot of others are trying to turn this into a systemic issue, when it's clearly not a systemic issue. Since 1915, there have been 4 gun-related deaths on movie sets in the United States. 4 in over 100 years.
And how many gunshots have occurred in that time?
This is not a systemic issue with the film industry and not being safe with firearms. It's just flat out not.
It's not. No.
But because of the attempt to assuage his own guilt, his own sense of guilt, he's trying to turn it into a systemic issue. He's trying to turn it into the film industry needs to do better. How?
Right. Well,
How do you do better than that?
that's the denial piece, right? If he can't accept what he did, it has to be the film industry.
I think there are more people who have died in the ice capades than have died from guns on movie sets. Like, how do you make a system safer when it is, I think, literally as safe as it can be? And you have to, I mean, maybe having licensure, like a more strict licensure
the armor position.
for the armor position that requires, much like in the counseling field, a test that discusses specific safety roles.
What about the taking something? The airline industry is a great example of an industry that can learn from mistakes. I would say that's what they're best at, right? And they use a checklist, and two people always, co-pilot and the pilot, always go through each item, right? Might not like an armor and assistant armor, and they have to work together every time a weapon goes into somebody's hand, and they both check. And don't use the director or anybody else. It's just,
we that could be done, but I'm sure there are armorers out there who already do that they use a check system and they use safety protocols, and they're already really safe. But yeah, we might be able to guarantee a little bit more safety by ensuring that the license for head armor requires a greater degree of experience. Like, I don't know, with counseling, we had to get 2,000 hours worth of direct clinical work in a period of time under supervision. Mm-hmm. So maybe if that's required for a head armor position, we might be able to see something like this not happen with these types of circumstances. But in general, it's not a systemic issue. Mm-hmm. There's not much we have to change with the system because literally millions of rounds have been fired on camera in the last 105 years. And there's been 4 deaths on sets due to firearm issues.
Yeah, it's incredible.
I don't think there's any other industry that's existed for that long that can say that there's that few number of deaths for any given thing.
Even if you extend it to all accidents, they're not extremely common on movie sets. They're pretty good, especially considering they do dangerous things.
Yeah. Like you said, more people will die during the takedown of a set than will die.
It's pretty dangerous. Construction.
Firearms,
Yeah. Construction's always going to be more dangerous than movies. I think what happens though is, let's face it, what happens in these movies is that when somebody famous dies, then it's a big deal. But when a construction laborer dies, nobody really cares.
Oh, it's really sad. Let's make sure the life insurance policy goes out to the family and move on.
There's something about a high-profile death that I think concerns people more for whatever reason. Like the idea of Hutchins dying behind a camera, probably going to be more significant in terms of the payout, the award, than an unknown laborer dying because he's crushed by pipes or whatever when he's taking something down.
Which is far more likely to happen than a gun accident on set.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This was the behavior of a few people that came together and ended a life, injured somebody else. Very unlikely. Baldwin said it was 1 in a trillion, but even that seems like a little bit of a denial. It was his behavior, in part. Mm-hmm. So 1 in a trillion, yes, it was rare. I agree it was something that happens rarely, but it was because of partially his actions. So it's a little weird to say 1 in a trillion when you literally have a hand in it. Mm-hmm. It's finger on the trigger.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's like that Seinfeld episode with the proctologist. 1 in a million shot, Doug. 1 in a million.
All right, so that's where we'll wrap it up for the movie Rust incident. We'll have to update this, of course, because something's going to happen. It might be a quick update, like no charges, reminiscent of The Crow. Or it might be something reminiscent of Twilight Zone when there's a trial and no one gets convicted and it's awful. Or it could be a conviction. I think it would be the first time ever a conviction's resulted from a movie set fatality. Right. If, there's a long way to go before we get to a conviction, but we'll have to see what happens. But certainly a tragedy, and I don't know. I don't know what the lesson is other than you have to be responsible with weapons.
Yeah. Safety first.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have to do
Always.
your job. You have to, even if you feel like you don't have enough experience, go through all the things that should be just gone through, all the safety checklists, all the safety whatevers, no matter what you're getting paid, no matter what the circumstances are, no matter what your dad does or did for a living, it's the same expectation. And yeah.
Yeah. And maybe if you're the armorer, maybe having fun on set shouldn't be a priority. I think there are positions on a movie set where people should have fun. The actors, camera people, all the, people make the sound, whatever. But the armorer should be the one serious, unfunny person on a set.
I think the armorer can be the funny person once all the guns are behind a locked.
There you go. They can join in later.
Like they like, okay, all the guns, all the ammunition, all locked, stable. All right, let's go get some beers.
Well, at that point, maybe they could have like water guns or something and be like, this is how I'm going to have fun.
Like, hey, don't point those at me.
Well, then you could actually get like a picture. Like she had that picture of the two guns. She had like water guns or something and like, have fun with that. Sure.
Yeah, I think the days of freewheeling armorers, the armorer / comedian at nighttime is probably over. I think she killed that whole.
Which is a shame because everybody knows the armorers are really the funny people. Said like they're gonna have to be really serious from now on, and it's just gonna
ruined it for everybody.
She did ruined it for everybody. It's terrible. That's the takeaway.
So do we have ideas for an item for voting?
I was thinking either like a cowboy hat would be a good one.
I don't know how you would print it, but if you could print rust in some way, like a rusty piece of metal or something, I don't know.
Well, I could always try and do the church. I could do the church or cowboy hat, or the golf cart. Like we had a good conversation about a golf cart. But, a cowboy hat or the church, one of the two. That's our options for a printed item. I'm still working on. I think from John Orr, people most votes were for the incendiary device. Mm-hmm. So I gotta work on putting that together.
I imagine it's pretty elaborate, colors and small pieces and yeah.
No, it's just a book of matches and a cigarette.
Mm-hmm.
Which
with a rubber band, right?
No, I think you just put from what I understand, you just put it in and folded the.
Oh, I thought he tied them together with a rubber band and put some paper around it. I can't remember.
I'll double check. Make sure I get. I'll go for accuracy. I'll go for as much accuracy as I can with it. But I got to find a cigarette and a model and a matchbook model. Put them together. Which actually, that even I meant to mention. I don't think I did in the episode, but like it wouldn't work now. Like you couldn't use a cigarette and a matchbook to.
I think you did mention it.
Mm-hmm.
They have a block in there that prevents them.
There's holes in the paper, or ribbons of paper that will stop it from burning. Yeah, it won't burn all the way down. In the 80s, it did. Oh, I must have mentioned it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could always use a fuse.
Yeah.
Like a traditional, because you can get those traditional fuse. Like they have like the old movies like the dynamite, where they light it. Yeah, exactly.
Going all around the room.
Pretty much what they do. Yeah, it's pretty much how it works.
A lot of sparkles going all over the place.
Right.
I don't know if they spark in real life.
Some of them do.
I guess they could. And some burn very slowly. In movies, they often burn real quick.
Mm-hmm. It depends on the fuse. Some of them are fast burning fuses that actually burn really, really rapidly.
Well, you buy them buy them in minutes, right?
Yeah. You buy them by how quickly they burn per foot.
Yeah. So, cigarettes. Yeah, wouldn't be the best way. Maybe cigar. That work?
Possibly. Maybe like a cigarillo, something smaller.
Not a vaping device, though.
No, definitely not a vaping device. I mean, although that is a battery, so you could potentially use that as an electrical, in an electrical way. Especially the more hardcore vaping things. They have a coil that heats up really, really high. If you take the batting off of that, you could use that. Set things on fire.
Could work. I remember years and years ago. I've never smoked, but you remember a company called Radio Shack? Remember
I used to love Radio Shack.
I used to go and buy all kinds of stuff, relays, wires, LED lights, switches, and put together projects because they had project kits.
Right. Yeah, the breadboards and all that.
Yeah, so I had pretty much all those project sets, like 201 and 181 or whatever. But then I would go and build other stuff because it was always contained in that box. So I wanted to go build free of that, and I go buy like buzzers and whatever. And one time they had a solar powered cigarette lighter. And I was a kid. I wasn't smoking. I've never smoked, but I'm like, just really cool. So I got it. I forget what it was. It was like $3 or something back in the early 80s. And it wouldn't light paper. Cigarettes are different. I didn't know that. I was a kid. I'm like, I didn't realize they're designed to burn easier. So I would like practice with it. You have to watch your eyes. It's like a parabolic mirror thing, and I couldn't light anything.
It's a rice paper instead of wood paper, so it combusts easier.
Yeah, and the tobacco, whatever. But yeah,
I went to Radio Shack. If you remember back when I was in grad school, I made the Jeopardy buzzers for you. Like that was a great thing. Project using Arduino. Most of the stuff that I bought at Radio Shack before it went bankrupt, before it vanished off the face of the earth.
Yeah, now you have to order that stuff online, but back then they're like local stores. There was one on University Plaza. Go to all the time, and they had all the like electronics you could possibly want hanging right on the walls. Yeah, go through and get any diode, resistor. All of it was great.
There's a new hobby shop coming to Eden Square, I think, in Bear, Delaware, which I was really surprised about. I'm like, okay, well that's cool. Obviously there's not really anything, not much anyway, around here that might offer something like that. So I'm glad. I hope that there's some kind of demand for that, and hopefully they're able to survive.
There's a hobby shop. I noticed it the other day. There's a hobby shop in People's Plaza that has a bunch of that kind of stuff. I just recently started learning more about RC cars. I was trying to build a rig for Halloween. It started last year during the social distancing COVID. Like I had a rig where I had just a ghost on pulleys that went down a zip line from our second floor window down to the end of the driveway. It was great, but there was a certain point where it just, because it was gravity fed, it just kind of bottomed out and stopped, which was about 5 feet from where I needed to stop at the end of the driveway. So I was like, all right, well, I'll just build a rig that uses an RC car. I'll just cannibalize an RC car, use the motor, and have it, zip up and down the zip line. I started that project beginning of October. Was not able to use it on a Halloween, which sucked. Because I underestimated how much power, or I overestimated how much power that particular motor had. And it just was not enough power to move the rig at all. So I had to go back to the drawing board and get a bigger motor, which meant getting a bigger battery, which meant getting a relay system, meant getting an electronic speed control system, and just had to learn all about this stuff about how to basically build your own RC car in order to build this rig that's just supposed to go up and down a zip line.
Maybe next Halloween.
I've had to do a lot of 3D printing. I'm still working on it, but when it gets up and running, I'll have a zip line rig that'll be able to use remote control to make go up and down the rig, which I could also put like a GoPro on and get action shots. We could put it in here and just have it zip across. That's right. Do a nice slow action shot of all the stuff on the table.
Pretty good. Yeah, we can hang a camera. Hang a camera from it. So the vote would be the small church,
or the cowboy hat.
Cowboy hat. Yeah. Very good. Any final thoughts before we wrap up, Rust?
I don't remember if we said this during when we had started filming or before that, but Alec Baldwin's wife, Hilaria. Am I saying that? Hilaria or Hilaria?
I think it is Hilaria.
I believe it is.
Yeah. Every time I say that, I'm like, this can't be right. But
it can't be right. That's hilarious.
Exactly. So she had posted something about mental health, right? And afraid that he's going to have PTSD as a result of all of this. And
probably.
Well, and so that's real, of course. He accidentally shot someone, but he pulled the trigger, right? And he probably was a witness to her fighting for her life, right? And yeah, absolutely, that is very distressing, very traumatizing, or has the potential to be. So she's not wrong with that, of course, and whatever Alec is dealing with right now is very real. Whatever everyone on that set is dealing with right now emotionally is very real, and should not be discounted in any way. So I hope that Alec is getting whatever help he may need, right? I hope he's trying to process and deal with these things effectively instead of denying, instead of trying to run away from it, or anything like that. Because we know all too well that that's just going to result in worse consequences for him, right? Behavior or emotions or whatever it might be that are just going to spiral if not dealt with properly, right? So I hope that he is able and willing to deal with it in an effective and appropriate way. And he's an actor, of course, right? So he has media coverage, press coverage and everything all the time. People are constantly trying to get video of him, pictures of him, trying to figure out what he's doing, things like that. So I'm sure that doesn't help with his process of trying to process through this. And I'm no actor or anything, but I imagine that he's got to, at this point, he's found some way in his life to separate himself from all of the attention that he gets as an actor, right? From media and whoever else. People follow him with cameras, things like that. So I hope that he's able to do the same here, able to separate all of that, the stress and whatever it might feel like demands from all of that, from what he needs to do personally for himself to be able to deal with this. I'm glad that Hilaria brought that up. I think that should be a focus, of course. It shouldn't be overlooked as well. And I'll say the same for everyone on the set as well. For Hannah as well. I mean, whether she's at fault or not, she should do the same thing, right? I mean, this is something that probably deeply affects her too, as well as everyone else on the set. So I'm glad that was brought up and really can't be understated.
Yeah, it's a lifetime of regret for a few moments of mistake.
Mm-hmm.
It's tragic. Yeah. Any final thoughts?
So most of my final thoughts surround just the idea of, this whole no more guns in movies kind of thing. It's a knee-jerk reaction. It's not necessarily an appropriate reaction, because the history just doesn't bear out that they're a terrible thing. There are some action heroes out there who can do great action sequences without guns. They can do movies, good action movies without guns. And they work. I mean, even on TV, you can get MacGyver can do, amazing things without firearms. So I'm not one to say you can't do action movies without guns, but some of those movies that have guns, they're filmed safely, and there's no reason to not have those. They're part of a greater culture that is part of the United States, and they need them. They need to be part of our culture and need to continue to be part of our culture, because for some, that's the vicarious way we get around, we go through life seeing these things and say, well, I don't have the urge to go out and shoot someone because I just watched a movie where they did that. It's not that movies prompt people to go out and do that. It's movies are the vicarious way so we don't have to. It's a way of getting off stress off of my life when I was thinking about that all day long. Not that I'm thinking about it all day long, but there are people in general who just get really fed up with things, and if given the opportunity, might go postal. The reason why that's even a saying is because of shootings and things. But the vast majority of people who enjoy those kinds of movies don't go out and shoot people, partially because it's a release to see these kinds of movies. And I don't think there's a reason to kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater on this one. It'd be like, this one accident means we should never use these ever again. As by and large, it's a very safe thing to do on movie sets.
I think it speaks to the capriciousness of life and death sometimes, right? I mean, if the barrel had been pointed, again, I don't know the geometry because I don't know exactly how far it was away, but say an inch over could have made the difference, depending on, it would have been like, oops, wow, that was scary. Maybe a few days of stress, and then...
If he'd moved a little bit faster on the draw, I could have discharged over here instead of over here and would have taken out one of the windows, and people are like, holy crap, what the hell happened?
Yeah. Just another negligent discharge.
Another negligent discharge, and things would have gone on. And instead, it ended up being fatal shooting.
Yeah. What a terrible confluence of circumstances. So a few lessons learned here, and I think just another more evidence that safety does not take long, and it can save you a lot of hassle in the long run. That extra step. Do I check the oven one more time? Not in an OCD way, right? But do I check that oven one more time? Do I check that lock one more time? Do I check that weapon one more time? The answer to that question is always yes.
Always yes. If you always treat it as if it's loaded.
Yep. I had one instructor one time say, think of like a laser extending from the barrel all the time. It's burning everything in its path. Mm-hmm. If you never point it at somebody, chances are you'll never kill somebody with it. Even if it does somehow magically discharge, which of course you want to avoid as well. But
the magical discharges, yeah. Just in general, that's a thing to avoid. Yeah. Magical discharges, firearms, other things. You don't want any magical discharges.
It's never followed by anything good. Oh, I had a magical discharge, and I'm happy.
Whoa. No.
Discharge is one of those words that usually doesn't have any kind of positive connotation.
Like alcohol-fueled. Yeah. It's never like alcohol-fueled college degree.
Even in like a medical
Although
way.
there are quite a few of those.
University of Delaware, for many people, right?
For many, many people. It was voted #1 party school in the country a couple of times.
Yeah.
Ooh. Now, discharge can be good if it's like discharged from the hospital.
Well, that's true.
Like
but in other
program,
medical ways.
But yeah.
Having a discharge, nobody usually likes to hear that.
Yeah, and a magical or a sudden discharge is never good. Even in the case of I was hospitalized and then there was a sudden discharge. Whoa. I had many, many people who were suddenly discharged from inpatient places, usually administratively.
Yeah, so there's certain things. Certain terms aren't followed by happy times. Right? So that was our episode of The Murder Part. Again, can't emphasize enough, no murder took
But there
place.
was a death.
Was a death. I don't think there was a murder, but certainly a fatality. It was terrible. And we will be back soon with another Murder Part. We're looking at alien lizard humanoids. And, of course, we'll have a question and answer because we had many questions.
So many questions.
Which is a good thing. Yeah. Good thing.
We love it. We love it.
We'll still try to get to them all. We just need to make a special episode to squeeze in all the questions and have some time to answer.
Just call it the question part.
That's right. It's the question part. So that'll be coming up soon. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.